my good friend Vincent Genna. He is an incredible psychic, intuitive medium. And then he has this whole ET connection that kind of just knocked on his door. He opened that door and boom, he's really tuned into that world. So his talk is going to be close encounter. There he is, Vincent Genna, close encounters of the psychic kind. So he's going to bridge that gap between aliens, the psyche, consciousness, and why they're here, maybe. So happy to have you, Vincent.
Oh my gosh, it's exciting to be here, especially this time where you're talking about this expanded consciousness. And Neil, I'm going to tell you what the next step is. That's what this whole lecture is about. The next step and the most important step. Well, it's great to be here. And yes, I now consider myself an interstellar liaison, shall we say, okay, because of that connection. They connected with me, an intergalactic council, spiritual council connected with me. So this is about what they have been telling me. But I do want to give a little preliminary before I get into that. Real quick, I'm sure you guys already know all of this. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the different scales of contact that we now know. And actually, J. Allen Hynek created this scale. And of course, the first one is close encounters of the first kind. That's visual sightings. All right, we've had that. We've seen a lot of that, right? And the government has footage of all of that, as well as people do. And then the second one is a UAP. I've got to throw that in now, or a UFO event with a physical effect is alleged. So whether there is a spacecraft that has crashed in Roswell or anything like that, now you're getting more physicality to this encounter, right? And then, of course, we know close encounters of the third kind, right? Where we see animated. Where did we see that, right? This was one of my favorite movies, right? Where they first communicated in the movie, right? Okay, well, we've gone beyond that, that's for sure, where there's close encounters of the fourth kind, where it's an event in which a human is abducted. That was all going on at the same time as the first three were happening, right? I'm going to be talking about why they've been abducted. You know, us humans like to always put a negative spin on everything first before we put a positive spin on that. And you know why? Because we've heard more no's in our life from birth than we heard yeses. So we've been trained to pay attention to the negative and not the positive. But I'm going to talk about the positive, about those abductions. And without them, we would not even be here today. So we'll talk about that. Now there's close encounters of the fifth kind, when that involves direct communication, but human initiated. Okay. Who's done that recently? Well, we've got, if you've heard of Christopher Bledsoe Sr., he's the most documented one of making those human connections in sightings, in them actually orbs and actual spacecraft coming to him. And Dr. Stephen Greer has close encounters of the fifth kind, actual protocol, where you can sit there and you do a meditation and you go through a series of steps, and then you can actually call in these orbs. Well, we've got to talk about what those orbs are, okay? We're going to go beyond that, and we're going to add close encounters of the sixth kind, where it's actually caused the death of a human or an animal associated with it. I'm sorry, I have not known any deaths of a human. Animals, yes, but also of necessity. That happened in Skinwalker Ranch. If you're familiar with any of that, where they were dissected cattle, not mutilated cattle. There is a specific reason for that, and it was caused by our ET brothers and sisters. We'll talk about that. And then close encounters of the seventh kind, where there is a hybrid. I'm going to tell you right now, we've experienced close encounters of the seventh kind. But I'm here to talk about the most important close encounters, and that's close encounters of the psychic kind, which is actual communication, alien to human, human to alien. That's the next step, and it's the most vital step, because it then answers all the other steps. So this is what I would like to do. I know I went through this fast, but they have given me a lot of information about who they are, why they've come here, all right, their purpose, and the next steps of their existence around our universe, okay? Now, I know you've heard a tremendous amount of information regarding this. If you are here today, then that means that you have an interest, you've been seeking out. Maybe you have a curiosity because you've heard some things. My curiosity started, years ago with the first book, Communion, that was fabulous, about alien abductions, right? And so since then, I've always had an interest in UFOs and aliens. But of course, my psychic ability and my mediumship ability took precedence until they started communicating with me. So the information that they've given me may rock your world. Good. It needs to be rocked. Look at the world today. If you think it's in the place that it should be, you're wrong, which is the major reason why we're seeing more of them come here today. So what I would like to do for the next amount of time that I have with you is, instead of talking in the third person and telling you what they've told me, I'm just going to speak as the person, the being that has spoken to me the most, one of the council leaders, and I'm not channeling him, and it is a male figure. I'm just going to be speaking as he has spoken to me, just to make it easier. You'll know when I'm back. Believe me, you'll know when I'm back. Okay? So I would just like to speak and tell you and share. First of all, we have been here since the beginning of your existence on this planet, at least the one that is documented per your Neanderthals and per the Bible. But you had an existence before that as well. But we helped to establish you and get you going. You have indications of that in Egypt. There has been many of those writings on the wall and hieroglyphics that show that we have come down. We taught you advanced geometry and mathematics so that you can create and develop your civilization. But the greater surprise is that you are not the same being that started as the Neanderthal. It would have taken you too long to evolve to the modern man or mankind that you are today, humankind, to be correct in your world. So we helped you out. There is scientific evidence that your DNA has been spliced. Yes, there is evidence of that, and studies. You can read about it in many different authors' books and their journals. And that is about how we cut some of your DNA and spliced it with some of our own. So humans in modern humans that appeared on your planet 11,000 years ago, almost instantaneously, are all hybrids. We helped to create the human you are today. In fact, there are organizations and companies that if you have your DNA tested, they will tell you how much of you comes from modern man and how much of you comes from Neanderthal. The two DNA strands are separate. And we had to do that because you were progressing so slowly. Now, I know that is mind-blowing, and certainly they would not change any of your history books because that would rock all of the colleges, all of the learnings, all of the degrees you have all received down there on earth, especially religion. So, the beginning of Adam and Eve in your Bible is the story of that modern man and the beginning of the hybrid. Here is proof in your own Bible there was an existence of two species at that time. In your story of Cain and Abel, Cain killed his brother Abel, and God cast him out of the Garden of Eden. But as he casts him out, he says two things to Cain. First, I put the mark of Cain on you so others would know who you are. Second, and this is the part nobody has ever questioned, not even your religious teachers. God said to Cain, you shall not procreate with those of your kind. You can only procreate with those of the earth. Who was God referring to? Or why was that even written in your Bible, if not to distinguish modern human from Neanderthal human? You're hybrids. Now, other information that you believe in that needs to be simplified. First of all, you are going to have a very difficult time getting to a higher consciousness if you are paying so much attention to what the government knows and what the government is hiding. Spend more attention on your own individual consciousness. Our advancement came from our development of our spiritual side, not our physical or just mental side. We are body, mind, and spirit as well. Whereas down on earth, humans like to focus on the physical, which also includes power and money. Because of that focus, you separated from the most important part of who you are and your higher consciousness, your spiritual side. We focused on that. It was even proven by many who have experienced contact with us. Recently, it has been who you just have spoken about before, the interview with Jake Blair. He experienced a spiritual connection with us, with the one who was actually in that one UAP, or we will say a saucer or ship, however you can accept it. She was piloting it, and he experienced both sadness and love and positivity. She was sad because she crashed on your planet, and she knew what the outcome was going to be. But when you connect with us, you're connecting directly to who your soul really is and who we really are, divine beings and creations. You've constantly separated your spirituality between the physical side of you and then a religious side of you. And the religious side of you doesn't get any attention unless you are involved in that. But it is not religion that makes you spiritual. It is spirituality that has caused religions. However, the proper definition of your spirituality is your higher consciousness and who you are. And that's what you're beginning to recognize and step into, but it is still taking you a long time because you're complicating it too much. Now, who is out there in your universe? No one else. No other living existence is in your particular universe. Each universe comprises one species. And you are the species of the universe that you can see. To the extent and range that you can see out into the universe, every star, every planet, every gas and neutron experience you have in that realm is only in your universe. Our universes are in different dimensions. Now, the interesting part is that your government does have spacecraft, not many, and only pieces of it. And they've been trying to reverse engineer to find out our propulsion ability. It doesn't matter if they discover it or not. And so that you all know, they are right now in the midst of attempting to create an intergalactic spacecraft. You see, many of your government scientists already know that you are using up the resources of your natural Earth. So they are figuring that there will be a way or another planet that they can go to that can harbor humans. Well, you might get as far as another distant planet from your own solar system. However, you will never escape your own universe unless you develop the principles of spiritual understanding, because it requires dematerialization. And dematerialization only happens in a higher consciousness when you realize you are made of more space than you are made of matter. Now we're talking quantum physics. And that is what you should be spending most of your time on understanding. Yes, your world is a physical illusion. Your brain puts together the pieces purposely so that you can live in this physical world and function in it. You would never be able to function if all you saw was space. But that's all there truly is. And you are filling in the space with your own images of what you can accept. It is exactly what your own brain does with your vision. You have a blank spot in the middle of your vision. It's where your eye nerves connect to the back of your brain. The macular is what you call it. Macular degeneration is when that spot gets too big and you begin to notice it. However, you at a normal vision do not walk around seeing that blank spot. Why? Because your brain fills in the space. Now, it doesn't fill it in with something it's already seen. Otherwise, you would be seeing overlap. It fills it in with what it knows should be there. This is the exact principle that your brain is doing for the space that's around you now. But if you keep focusing only on the biological, you will never get past that. In your own body, there are doctors who have discovered that some of your own electrons and atoms will dematerialize in one place in your body and rematerialize in another. So you've got two atoms sharing the same electron in different locations of your own body. Once you learn this principle, then you will also learn how to become a part of any matter. You question how we can come through mountains and out of water, out of thin air, as if they were non-existent. It's because we know the principles of dematerialization. We also know the principles of polarization and use your Earth gravity to propel our ships. Two types of ships will come to your planet and have been. There will be those unmanned that are actual just monitors, your own drone system, but much more advanced. And no, very few have been to the state of New Jersey. So just want to clear that up for you. Now, who and what are Palladians? If we came down to you as we truly appear, even 2,000 or 10,000 years ago, you would never have been able to accept us for who we were and are. So we appeared as we looked prior to our full evolution. Similar process that you're going through now. So we came to you looking like humans. They are not from your planet Pleiades or star system at all. Like I said, there is no other living creature existing beyond your Earth plane. We come to you as we can, as you are capable of experiencing us. Why do we abduct you? Well, you create biological diseases, viruses, incredible elements that will destroy and can destroy your body and do it on a daily basis. So much so, it is faster than your own body's ability to counter those creations. You would be non-existent today if we did not keep manipulating your genes, which is why we will abduct some people. But we attempt as best as possible to cause no harm. You actually cause more harm on your planet with your own scientific research and what you would give and do to humans just to try to create a drug or some new cure. We do it as gently as possible and in an attempt to wipe the memory so that way you don't remember or recall why and what the experience was. But just as your own drugs that attempt to wipe the memory of your surgeries, they don't always work. It depends on a person's consciousness and strength of consciousness. Some people are more determined to be in touch and in connection with all the levels of their consciousness. They do that from an unconscious level. And then there are those who are oblivious, but then they are also oblivious to conscious things that go on around them. So this is the reason why some remember and many don't. Many more don't remember. Now, this is happening worldwide and not just in the United States. It's been going on for many years that we have been visiting all different parts of the world. In Peru, they accept us as if we are family. And just so that you know, we are. We, all souls, were created at the same exact time. We too have a soul or are a soul when we leave our physical existence. So the visitations you are having are either in physical form, when you see your spacecraft, when you see appearances of creatures, those are the physical forms of who we are. Then there are the spiritual ones, as the ones that make contact with some of your humans down there. Okay? Vincent has been talking with a spiritual council of extraterrestrials, not a physical one. But you also, when you're in spirit, can visit other planets and speak with other of your brothers and sisters. Yes, we are all brothers and sisters. Just as in spirit, we come to you as guides as well. We've been doing that since all our existence. We, again, just paid more attention to our spiritual nature than our physical nature and our mental nature, and developed that much faster and at a higher rate. than you did. We can say that the human species is the least evolved of all the species. I don't think that's such a surprise to many of you. There are those who would like to believe they are more advanced than other living beings, which is the reason why they need to make us look less humane and more animalistic, or these days as insects. You will never get a full understanding of who we are as you keep creating those kind of movies, because they instill fear in us. Because right away, everybody is thinking there is that group of you who believe that we're going to come and harm you in some way. But your own intellects in the past have acknowledged that in order for us to escape our universe, we would have to have command of spiritual principles. Albert Einstein said that himself and believed in other existences. And he is and was correct. You have to have command of spiritual principles. We are then all benevolent and never malevolent. Now, why there were mutilations that you call in so-called areas, whether they be in Skinwalker Ranch or other parts of the world? There are organisms that you still eat. We don't eat the same way as you do. We drink our food, which is the reason why you see many of us and our species with smaller mouths. We've learned to take in only nutrition and still enjoy flavors. But on Earth, you pay very much attention to what you're eating and how much you eat of it. Well, many of the foods that you are eating today are causing you great harm because of all of the products that are being put into those foods, particularly animals. And of all the animals, which is the meat that you've been told is the worst? Beef. Well, it would be more difficult for us to take an entire cow into one of our ships and then dissect it to find out what is wrong with it. So we do it on your planet. That is all we chose to do, is to dissect it, to again research it, inspect it, and find out what molecules in it, what cells within the beef are holding the harmful poisons that you are taking into your body, and what can we do to help generate a stronger gene so that you are not creating the cancers that you are creating. You apparently like a long life to live. We are only helping you with your own desires. If it wasn't for our species, you would not have had the same discoveries. We also helped to implant inspirations in many of your scientists' minds. Angels guide, what you call angels, they're just older brothers and sisters who remained behind when everyone decided to incarnate on a planet or in a universe. So you've received many inspirations from many different directions. However you come by them, that is a wonderful aspect of the human mind, is that you will heed some of your inspirations. If you listen to them more, you would be able to make more contact with us. Now, in that abduction, we have also learned that there are biological differences in the way you procreate and create still your off-seedlings, your children. We have a more advanced way of doing that, yet still appreciate the intimate part of connection. So the other type of being that we are is we have learned to transform ourselves into light beings, which is what all of you can also do. Your Mayans knew how to do that because we taught them, which is the reason why you will never discover any remains of the Mayan culture, because they transfigured into light beings and just raised themselves into a new dimension. In fact, your figure Jesus came to Egypt to learn how to transfigure, which is what he did on the day he rose from the dead. He didn't rise from the dead. He transfigured himself into a light form, which is why when Mary saw him outside of his tomb, that she couldn't touch him. I have yet ascended to my Father's house, is what he said. He meant that he did not take, he was in light form and had not ascended into a higher dimension yet, into that realm where we will all go. Yes, there are different dimensions to experience. The earthly ones harbor your lost souls, or what your psychics and mediums may call as ghosts, or your ghost hunters. That is also your purgatory or limbo. Those are the dimensions closest to the earth. And then there are the dimensions beyond the earth, many of which we reside. I will tell you this again to simplify your understanding. There are not thousands of us in existence. There are only 12 universes, which is why the number 12 is so powerful in your own system. Biblically, the number 12 comes up many times. The 12 disciples, the 12 tribes of Jacob, and so forth, right? The 12 days of Christmas. There's 12, and numerology, as well as sacred geometry, is a part of your world as it's been a part of creation. And understanding and just accepting and putting all of that together would be so much easier than studying each subject individually. You spend so much time trying to understand one subject that you're missing the entire picture. What you're doing is you're holding one piece of the puzzle in your hand, and you refuse to put it down until you find a place for it on the entire board, without realizing that you may have to put in the other pieces first before you find the space for the one you're holding in your hand. And those other pieces of the puzzle are more about who you are as a spiritual and conscious being, a higher conscious being. Edgar Cayce, in your works, has written about the oversoul. Your oversoul is the soul that the higher force, the deity, the God force that you call God or Yahweh or Elohim has created. And then you yourself, right here on this planet, is only an essence of that, a projection, only a piece of that higher soul. What you are attempting to do and need to do is not to worry about what science you're going to connect to, but to connect to the rest of who you are, your higher consciousness, learning how to open your channel. And you can communicate with us just the same as a medium can communicate with a deceased loved one. Life continues and is everywhere, and you can communicate with all of it. There are those of you there who can communicate with the animals of your earth, with even the plant life of your earth. Well, that is the simplest form of communication. You can go beyond your planet in communication and communicate with us, those that are in the spirit realm, those of us that exist in all dimensions. That communication can be strong and a part of your daily life and receive guidance every step of the way. You are now seeing a lot of what people are calling those orbs. Well, those are us as light beings. And so we can transfigure out of that light form and that orb form into what our physicality actually looks like and appears to be. Some of your people on your planet have experienced that. This is me talking again, Vincent. Yes, that's exactly a phenomenon that's been going on today, and more so is people seeing those orbs. In fact, that's what Dr. Stephen Greer is calling in, and Christopher Bledsoe is also calling in, are the light orbs. So right now, those that are doing the CE5 protocol and those that are seeing those orbs are just seeing the light configuration of them. They are not transfiguring for them into their actual ET appearance. And that's mostly because they don't want to startle. They truly don't want to scare us, which is one of the reasons why they came at night and one of the reasons why they sneak here, shall we say. I will give now what I've been told about why they appeared more in the earlier times of our existence. And then there was a period where we weren't seeing any UFOs at all. And now all of a sudden they're coming back into existence the way we're seeing them, the way the government has picked them up, right? Since actually before the 1940s and 50s, they actually came in earlier than that again. But here was the thing that the council had told me. If you think about this, okay, think about it as if you are a big brother and you have either a little brother or a little sister and you're going to school together, right? Except you're in high school and maybe he or she is in middle school or elementary school and she's doing or he's doing math homework and you're in the kitchen with them and you're doing the homework with them and you go, hey, Susie, the answer to number 5 is 10. And mom happens to be in the kitchen with you and turns around and says, hey, Alan, hey, Neil, listen, you know, your little brother or sister has to learn this on her own, right? So don't, I know you really want to help, but give her a chance to learn it by herself. She'll know, she may make a mistake, but that's how she learns, okay? So don't help him anymore, okay? Now, mom leaves the kitchen. Okay, mom, whatever. You don't want to get in trouble, right? So she leaves the kitchen and you're looking around. Okay. Hey, Susie, the answer to 20 is 1, right? So now you're sneaking in the help, right? Because you still want to help. Well, that's what our alien brothers and sisters are trying to do, is they were sneaking in because that's why the council was formed. The council was created to help guide all of the souls that are actually going from place to place and incarnating and reincarnating and wanting to travel and wanting to visit. So instead of everybody getting all confused with all of these dimensions, there is a guidance group of beings. Hey, look, Star Trek had it right. You know, remember the Galactic Council that they had back then? Oh, and they were all looking all different types of creatures. We had to make them look all different ways even then, right? All the way back then. But they were way ahead of their times, you know, in writing all of that. But what happens is that we were being left to grow on our own. But because we have been so slow in that, because we have been dying left and right all over the place from horrible diseases and disorders. I was a hospice social worker. I worked with over 500 patients while I was on hospice, and I helped them through the dying process and their loved ones and caregivers that were taking care of them. And I can't even begin to tell you some of the diseases that my patients were dying of, unheard of things, right? That began with cancer from under the pinky fingernail that metastasized throughout this woman's body. And it goes on from there. So if I was more advanced, I would want to do everything I could, including going and doing a little probing, right? Hey, we have worst probing here. Guys, when did you get your last colonoscopy? Okay, and I think that they've done a better job in trying to abduct and help us and do probing at the least and with the least amount of harm that they could. All right, yes. Were there some things that sacrificed? Yes. Were there some women that were pregnant and that they took? But those were hybrid babies to start with. And certainly you wouldn't want a Rosemary's Baby situation where a woman gave birth to a half alien, half human infant, right? So that infant was taken. I know, but don't we here also cause some disturbances in order to get great gains? We don't kill a lot of people, and then again, maybe we do. But we are at a point that we need to understand this psychicness. Now, I love how science has to change the word from psychic to psionic. I'm a psionic then, and I am making connection. And Jake made a connection, and it was a beautiful connection. That's what it feels like. I experience that all the time when I'm not only just making connections with my ET brothers and sisters that are wanting to talk with me. That's the exact same feeling that I get when I'm connecting with a human soul. I get that love. I get that feeling. And we have to open up our consciousness to that feeling. And as we do that, we're going to advance more. But we have to stop focusing so much on so many of these other things. It's an easy thing to understand. We are the high consciousness. We are what everything else is out there. It's just hard to see that. We are consciousness. We are everything. Remember, when it was written for a reason, whether you're religious or not, that we were created by this God force, whatever, again, you want to call it, right? This higher deity. And I'm still repeating things that were also said to me. We were created by this force, and it was said we were created in its image. So we know that, number one. Number two, we also know that that God, universal power, that omnipotent, divine, whatever, again, you want to call it, is part of everything. So that's number two. So therefore, with deductive reasoning, if it's part of everything, we are part of everything. I saw the most incredible quantum physicist at an event personally with doctors. She was incredible. And she was talking about quantum physics, right? And the reality of holographs. Okay, so if you take a holograph, shall we say, of an apple, and you see it, you make a holograph of it, and you slice that apple into pieces, and you take a piece of that holograph apple out, and you put it elsewhere, that one piece turns into the entire apple. That's who we are. We are the entire universe. Now, we do keep our individuality. They wanted me to know that, and I totally understand that from my work as a medium and my spiritual downloading that I've received. And we will have our own personalities because we get to enjoy being that piece of the universe. But that also means that the brother and sister sitting next to you, the one that you may want to judge and criticize, the one that you may want to think is invaluable, is also you. Every time you judge, harm, hurt, hate, criticize another being, you're criticizing a part of you. That's a very hard concept, but it's one of the highest spiritual concepts. When we gain that concept, we'll be able to walk through mountains too. Jesus tried to show us what we were capable of. Walking on water, that's nothing. I mean, we think that those things are so miraculous that we created a special religion around it, that only a sect of people believe that, and everybody else thinks it's nonsense. Well, as long as you think anything is nonsense, anything at all, then you're limited and you'll never make that higher connection, because nothing is nonsense. Anything we imagine with our limited minds on this earth, and this is one of the major things that they told me, is capable of being created and has already been created. We are not capable of imagining anything new. Everything we think of, everything we imagine already has existed and is real. So when we broaden our belief system, you will broaden your consciousness, because it's all about belief. And it doesn't matter how many seminars, how many workshops, and how much information you gather. We have a lot of those people. We have a lot of bookstores walking around, and they have got all this information because for the past several years, they've been going to New Age, New Thought, Paranormal, Scientific, UFO, ufology, MUFON, all of that material that they're gathering in here, and then go home and live the exact same existence before they went. Now, the knowledge does not gain you higher consciousness. The practice does. That's the most important thing that I have gained from my extraterrestrial friends and brothers and sisters, is that the practice of it. We have to heal ourselves. We have to clean the clutter out of that closet to gain a higher consciousness. And then you can accept what is appearing before us. And they are coming down more than ever before, because we are in the process of self-destruction. You are seeing another Sodom and Gomorrah going on right here. I quote a lot from the Bible, but not because I'm religious, but there were reasons why these stories were written. That was not a story about God destroying an evil town and countryside. It was about the humans there using their God force, or the force that George Lucas calls the Force, which, by the way, he was very metaphysical and spiritual. That story, Star Wars Saga, is about us and our connection to that God force. They were using it to self-destroy. And the angel came down to talk to Lot to find the critical mass. That's the exact same thing that's happening on the planet today. And not only are our angels, our brothers and sisters, and actually Chris Bledsoe calls those extraterrestrials angels. They did create us. They are trying to help us. They're trying to give us a critical mass, because the critical mass of positiveness will overtake all the negative that's happening on the planet. You're going to see more and more of them. And don't be surprised that one day they land in your backyard. Don't be afraid. Welcome them in. And don't worry about having to put out a big spread. I'm Italian and my wife's Jewish. Normally when we have company, oh my God, we have so much food left over, it's crazy. When they come, all I have to do is make some smoothies. That's all I have to do. It'll be the greatest thing. Telepathic connection and communication, psychic awareness, open it up, raise your consciousness, do it today. And you'll have an ET brother and sister at your next event.
So you think all these ETs are here for a positive thing? There's no negative aspect?
No such a thing. We want to create that. You know, people walk around negatively to start with, Alan, right?
Yeah.
They're the ones that will always believe there's a gray cloud hovering over them. If there's a hole in the ground, they would find it. That they look always for the evil in a person rather than the good in a person. Well, if they do that in the physical existence, they're going to do the same thing with anything else. Remember, they used to call the angels. As a matter of fact, they did. They even turned an angel into a devil. There is no such thing as Lucifer. That was a story created by the church in order to gain control during the Middle Ages when feudalism was a power. So if we did that with angels, what do you think we're going to do with our ET brothers and sisters that are actually visiting us?
So they're all here to help, you're saying, and it's just a matter of us opening up to them so we can meet them on an even playing field.
Absolutely. And Alan, don't we need to open ourselves up to each other?
Well,
right?
Yes.
And when we do that and learn how to do that and learn how to accept, it's going to take a long time for the majority of people on this planet to even open up to their own higher consciousness, no less some other higher consciousness that exists out there. But those of us who do care, this is the way you do it. You do it through your own personal journey.
Great.
But this presentation is basically based on Schoolyard UFO encounters, which is a type of UFO encounter that I think is very important because it shows that ETs are doing a very vigorous and well-organized publicity campaign to basically announce their presence in a very clever way by showing themselves to children. And these encounters are really interesting because there's really nothing out there like them. There are some cases of UFOs over concerts and sporting events. I wrote a whole book about encounters over drive-in movie theaters, which are certainly similar. But what differentiates these from all other cases really is that these are daylight encounters almost exclusively. They're very low level, quite long lasting. These objects will put on a display for people. 1/3 of the cases involve landings and or humanoids. 1/2 have occurred at elementary schools, primary schools. It's all over the world. Canada, United States, South America, England, all across Europe, Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Russia, China, you name it. These are happening everywhere.
Can you press the next slide? We're only seeing the Schoolyard thing. Can you move your slides down if you just...
you're seeing the book, right?
No, we don't see the book. Just press next slide, the down button there, or click on the slide.
I did. So I'm not sure why this is not working.
Can you click on the slide?
Let me try this a different way. Can you see it now?
Yeah, there. Now we see Schoolyard and UFO encounters. Okay, that's great.
All right.
We see that picture. Do you see that too on your screen?
I do. I had to,
you just have to do it that way you just did it. Yeah, that's okay.
All right. So yeah, these are very long lasting all over the world. And what's also important is they're very widely viewed. 10 or 20 witnesses would be on the low end, but it's usually more towards 50 or 100. And yes, children who actually make very good witnesses because they don't place judgment over what they're seeing. They're excellent learners. They're not overlaying their own belief system over these experiences. And for those who think children don't make good witnesses, I would remind you that over half of these cases do involve teachers who are really intelligent, educated, and do make good witnesses. But I do think children are excellent witnesses, actually. So I divided this presentation between 2 parts. Part 1 is sightings. Can you see this slide then?
Yes, I see part 1 sightings. Yes, I do.
Oh, all right, good. Then we're on track. So I'm going to go real fast through these first ones because I really want to get to the more interesting cases of landings and humanoids. But what I found is these go way, way back. The earliest I could find occurred in Spencer, Tennessee at Burrick College on June 1st, 1853, where 2 UFOs came down. This is a rare nighttime sighting, and put on a half-an-hour display, flaring up, dimming down, moving around, seen by both students and professors. But it really began in 1950, pretty much coinciding exactly with the modern age of UFOs. The earliest case I could find was in Prestonburg, Kentucky. It occurred on March 15, 1950 at Prestonburg Elementary School. This is a really interesting sighting because this craft came down and so low it actually caused panic on the playground. The children scattered, some were screaming, they ran into the school, and this UFO departed, but it came back about an hour later, just after the kids again came out onto the schoolyard. This was seen by the teacher as well, and the second time they came even lower. So in these cases, this is not a chance sighting of a UFO flying over a school. These schools are being specifically targeted. And I don't mean that in a negative way, because there's no evidence that they're trying to scare people or hurt them in any way. It's just a display. It's a very clever way, I think, just to say hello. Here's a case in Scotland at Elder Park Elementary School in the summer of 1952. School had just let out. Everyone was out in front of the school when a huge saucer-shaped craft came right over. You could see the shadow on the front of the school, and it hovered over one of the steeples right here, about 20, 30 feet above it. Stayed there for a full 5 or 10 minutes in full view of everybody, and then darted off over Glasgow, where it was witnessed by many, many people. All over the world this is happening. Here's a case in Burlington, Canada, July of 1953, where it hovered over a school again. Again, I'm going to go through these quickly and focus on more detail on just a few of these cases, like this one, Jerome Elementary School in Marysville, Ohio, on October 22nd of 1954. 2 UFOs showed up. The students finally called out the principal and one of the teachers who also witnessed it. What's really interesting about this case is that these objects emitted a huge volume of what we know of as angel hair. If you haven't heard of angel hair, it's a spiderwebby, cotton candy-like substance, usually dissolves very quickly. It did not in this case. It covered the school grounds. They ended up collecting a sample and sent it off to Lockburn Air Force Base, but never heard back from them. But no doubt that this was targeted over the school. Not only was the school covered in angel hair, but the area for about a mile around the school was also covered. It draped over trees and telephone wires. This is a very well authenticated sighting. And here's a witness who was there, who's still talking about it today. That is very clearly a display. That's what we're seeing in these cases. These objects come right down over schools. Here's one in 1955. Got about a really high quality case pretty much every year from the 1950 onwards. I'm certainly not going to be able to cover them all here, but here's a witness, Stanley McElhenney, who at age 13, along with everyone else on the playground, saw these metallic saucer-shaped objects shining, glistening in the sun, and hovering there for quite some time, to the point where the teachers really became quite concerned. What's really interesting is these encounters affect these students for the rest of their lives. Mr. McElhenney, he ended up becoming a lecturer on the subject, an astronomer, and a teacher in physics. So this is a pattern we see with a number of these witnesses who were very profoundly affected by their encounters. Here's another case I absolutely adore. This occurred at Whitsett Elementary School in North Carolina, October 27, 1955. About 7 sphere-shaped objects came over the school and again emitted a huge volume of angel hair. Now, the principal is a World War II veteran, had flown many, many hours, very familiar with aircraft. Air Force came and tried to debunk it. He wasn't having it. He had a big debate with these Air Force folks who tried to say that they had seen an inversion in the cloud layer and offered various debunking explanations. Again, they were able to save a sample of the angel hair. One kid actually reached down and tried to scoop it up, and he put it in his mouth before the teacher could stop him. He spit it out. He said it tasted salty. This is not cotton candy. We're not exactly sure what this is, but it's definitely been scientifically studied in numerous labs throughout the world and found to contain elements like boron, magnesium, and others. It's believed to be a byproduct of the plasma fields surrounding these objects. This is what I've been told by some contactees. They did send a sample to Burlington Labs, who said that this is definitely not spider webs. We don't know what it is. They suggested sending it to a biologist just to make sure. So they did, and the biologist said, no, it's definitely not spider webs. If it was, you would have seen huge volumes of spiders, and it's far too uniform. So ultimately, it's a mysterious substance that we can't fully explain, but again, believed to be a byproduct of the very hot plasma fields. Case after case. Here's one from New Zealand in Taradale Hawke's Bay, where on April 10, 1957, students at the local school here saw a shiny, metallic, long, cigar-shaped object hovering for several minutes before quickly darting away. I know I'm going through these quickly, but some I am going to spend more time on. I've got over 100 cases. Here is one from 1957, where a UFO hovered over Reefton District High School. Again, half the cases are at elementary schools, but also junior highs, high schools, and some at colleges as well. This one was viewed by 130 students and 3 teachers. And again, a clear display. These objects come from the horizon often, or way, way high up, and come lower and lower and lower and stop over the school, and sometimes hover in place or dart around, or sometimes flash lights and do all kinds of things to get people's attention. Not a whole lot of evidence information, I should say, of UFOs over China. It's very difficult to get information about the UFO subject there, but definitely found some cases in Paul Dong's book, UFOs over China, including one in 1958 where the UFO came so low that they could actually feel the heat coming off of this object. Here's an interesting one which occurred on October 29, 1959, where a student was on the football field, saw a UFO hovering there, ran inside to the locker room and called out all the students, who, just dressed only in their underwear, went running out to see it anyway. It was quite cool on this particular day, so they couldn't stay out long, but saw this object hovering there and finally went back inside when it was still there. Here's one which occurred in Markleeville, California in 1963, when 20 students and teachers watched this object come down, 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 all the way to a very low level. This is what they usually do, hovering only 50 feet over the school. This was a classic saucer-shaped metallic silver craft. Stayed there for about 10 minutes, then darted up very quickly. So you have to ask yourself, what is going on here? Why are they doing this? Very rarely do they affect a person physically, though sometimes strange things do happen, which certainly did happen to Sharon Stoll when she was on the playground at Lowell Elementary School on April 29, 1964, very, very close to the Lani Zamora landing, both in time and distance. She described an egg-shaped object which had a yo-yo-like movement and then a pendulum-like movement. She and other students saw it. She paid particular attention to it. And later in class, after it darted away, her eyes started to hurt. She went to the nurse. It appeared she had some very severe eye irritation. Her eyes, in fact, swelled up. She had to go to the doctor. She was given salve or a lotion to relieve her pain, but ended up being diagnosed with first-degree burns. on her face, like a very severe sunburn, which was odd because the sun was actually behind her. And not only that, in the weeks that followed, she grew a foot, almost a half a foot, and became quite mature, really alarmed her mother. It can't definitively connect this to her encounter, but it certainly was a strange effect, which they do think was a result of her sighting in some way. Here is a great example of how we know these objects are deliberately targeting schools. This is a case investigated by Raymond Fowler. It occurred on April 22nd, 1964, over Beverly High School. At the time, this was a rare nighttime sighting. There was a high school game going on in the auditorium, but a child who lived next to the school saw this object come over the school, called out her parents, who brought friends over, and a group of 10 of them watched this object, 3 of them actually, hovering over Beverly High School, one quite low. They called the police. The police came over and said, all right, who reported the plane? We're like, it's not a plane. It's right there over the school. The policemen were visibly shaken by this. At one point, one of the witnesses waved at this craft, which dropped down to, she says, about 20 feet over her head. It frightened her so badly, she actually soiled her pants and ran off. Later, Project Blue Book said that what these people had seen was Venus. Absolutely absurd, a debunking explanation. These craft darted off, and minutes later, and only a few miles away, 5 miles away, these craft went from Beverly High School to Gordon College and zoomed down over the quad there, scaring the daylights out of a group of college students. So again, clear evidence that these are deliberate actions on the part of these UFO occupants. And it's not just eyewitness testimony. There are cases of photographic evidence, such as occurred at Hotchkiss High School in Lakeville, Connecticut, where a UFO kept returning night after night. So finally, a student got out his camera and took this time-lapse photo you see here. What's really interesting about this is this object moved across the sky, disappeared, and came back, reappearing, apparently deliberately, to show that this was definitely an unusual object. I suspect it knew that it was being photographed and basically posed for this photograph taken by a student, which you can see here, it moving across the sky. Here's another excellent case, which took place at Sacred Heart Elementary School, witnessed by about 30 students, 3 nuns who were the teachers, as well as a police officer who just happened to have his video camera ready. He quickly ran to his patrol car, got his video camera, and was able to take about 30 seconds of videotape. Here is a still photograph from the videotape, which, if you are patient and industrious, you can find this online and see the full 30 seconds of film. By today's standards, it's perhaps not super great footage, but given the so many witnesses, including a police officer and nuns, this is excellent evidence. He says he actually turned this over, he reported to the police, to the government, and was visited by officers from an intelligence agency. Presumably, they would not identify themselves, who showed great interest in this sighting. Telling you there's case after case after case of this. Some of these cases do involve memory or amnesia issues. There was one in Spring Creek Elementary School in Dallas, Texas in 1967. 100 students were on the playground, but most do not remember it. One student remembers it clearly, and he asked around and finally found another student who did remember it, though their memories differed quite a bit. He remembered it releasing smaller discs, which swirled around, and the other kid, he remembered this object releasing little red pellets of some kind, and all the students going rushing towards it, and the teachers pulling everyone back inside. But later, he contacted these other students, and none of them had any recall of this. Not unusual with some UFO encounters, but to me, it's a red flag that there could possibly be more going on here. By that, I mean deeper levels of contact, because there is some evidence that in some of these cases, people are having more than just a simple sighting. Frank Salisbury was a biologist who wrote a book called the Utah UFO Display. This is in the Wichita Basin, not too far from Skinwalker Ranch. He had an excellent UFO sighting over Roosevelt High School on May 21st, 1968. The teacher, Mrs. Winterbourne, was there. All the students saw it. It hovered at very low level, right up next to the school, right over a hill, stayed there for 10 or 15 minutes, again during the day, and acted like, people felt like it was observing them as they were observing it. So often there's perhaps a little bit of a telepathic connection going on there. And it doesn't matter where these schools are. They can be in very urban locations, such as this one, which occurred at Public Elementary School number 54 in Bronx, New York, where over 50 eyewitnesses one day in May of 1970 observed an object which hovered over the school for such a long time that eventually helicopters showed up and chased it away. But it returned later that night for another display. Here is a very interesting case, one of my favorite. This occurred at Richmond Primary School in Maranui, New Zealand. 400 kids were on the playground playing loudly when all of a sudden they went completely silent. One of the teachers noticed this, looked around at all the students and saw that they were staring upwards. And he saw this massive disc, which he said covered a good portion of the sky, must have been hundreds of feet across, very low level. He couldn't tell exactly how low. Stayed there for a full 15 minutes. Everyone just stared at it in silence. One student walked up to him and said, what is that? Is that a UFO? And he said, yeah, I don't know what else it could be. After about 15 minutes, this disc turned on its side, assuming a vertical position, and darted off very quickly. That's an important detail because that is a sort of movement or a maneuvering that these objects are often described doing. Here's another really interesting case which shows how students react to this. On October 17, 1970, a group of students was out on the quad studying, and a beautiful silver disc came down very low level, about 50 or 100 feet, and hovered there and started to move very slowly away, at which point all of the students jumped up and chased after it, waving and saying, "Take us with you." It was a very benevolent encounter for these students. And again, none of these students have ever been caught in hoaxing. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. None of them have ever retracted their stories. And in most of these cases, they say that this is something that they think about daily. This is something that affects them for the rest of their lives. And here's a good example of it. Malcolm Robinson was at Bankery Primary School in 1970 when he and his buddies were playing football, and this, what they thought first was a weather balloon, came down over the school but just hung there perfectly still. They watched it for a good 10 minutes or so until they looked away briefly, looked back, and it was gone. And then they completely forgot about it. It wasn't until sometime later that Malcolm Robinson suddenly recalled this. And I don't think it's any coincidence that he is now one of Scotland's leading UFO researchers. This is another pattern we see, especially with UFO researchers. They will have a visitation, and that leads them on a quest, and they become quite prominent in this field. Here's another example of these objects being seen by police or government officials, perhaps. This is at Normandy Avenue Elementary School, Los Angeles, California, in 1973. 3 saucers started maneuvering around, probably would have stayed longer had not a helicopter shown up and chased them away. All over the United States, all over the world, this is occurring year after year. I'm doing these in chronological order. And again, these are just the sightings. April 2nd, 1973, a gray metallic object hovered at very low elevation over East Greenwich, Rhode Island. The class picture you see here is from the year of this sighting. So these could be, wasn't able to verify, but these could be the actual students who saw this gray object hovering. I'm suspecting that the 100 cases I was able to find is just the tip of the iceberg. I could easily double the size of this book because since then I've gotten another 100 cases. Not kidding. Sometimes these objects come very close to landing but don't actually land. That's absolutely what happened at Johnston Elementary School in Johnstown, New York on November 8, 1973. This is a case from James Book, MUFON field investigators, section director, who interviewed some of the students, who described this object as looking very much like a lunar lander. Came down, was literally feet above the playground when all the students came rushing towards it. And I think that's why it did not land. There was a bright flash of light and it was gone. I suspect it moved so quickly the students couldn't see it, but hard to say for sure because sometimes these objects are described as simply winking out of visible view. Another really interesting case over Western Carolina University in Cullowhee, North Carolina, where a group of girls in the girls' dorm started screaming at each other, and they all gathered and looked out and saw this object hovering right outside their window, just 100 or so feet away, 100 feet up in the air, and eventually darted off before they could get adults to witness it, who accused them of having hysteria and basically did not believe them. Here's another case I found where you can see the videotape of the teacher and the students being interviewed about their sighting at Steepleton Ashton School in Warminster, England. This was at a time where there was a huge wave of sightings. Some of these encounters are not isolated events. They occurred during a UFO wave, but that's not always the case. But this was certainly a very active area at that time. They described an object kind of looking like a smoke ring is how they described it, black and like really hard for the students and the teacher to describe. And the teacher himself said he was very glad to have the students there because if they hadn't been there, he would not have told anybody about what he saw. Again, these are events that affect people for years, and some of these students have regular reunions, which is certainly what happened at Rosieball Elementary School in Wales. This is the Welsh Triangle, a very major hotspot. February 14, 1977, they were all out there playing when this object with a sort of white silver base and a black dome came right over the school, began to prescribe several circles around the playground as if deliberately wanting to be seen, was seen by the teacher, who you can see here at the left, and all these students here. And they eventually started having reunions so that they could talk about this sighting, which affected them so profoundly. This is a very clever way for these objects to, I should say these ETs, to announce their presence. I really do think that's what's going on here. Not all of these cases are widely viewed. Here's a sighting in 1977 at Elmont Elementary School in Virginia, which involved only 2 witnesses. Sometimes it seems that these ETs are deliberately showing themselves to only a few people, and not everyone can see them. They do have that ability. It's quite curious. There could be a crowd of people, and only a few are seeing it. Researcher Don Worley is very well known. He's a great researcher, really pioneering in this field. and he reports on a case over Maplewood Elementary School in Connersville, Indiana in 1977. Case after case of this. Here's one that is really interesting because the teacher very wisely separated the students after their sighting and had them draw what they saw. This was in Cheshire, Wales, Upton Elementary School, 1977. 70s were a huge year for schoolyard sightings, or huge decade, I should say. But separated all the students. These are just two of the many pictures which the students drew, which show this object hovering, as they often do, in a grove of trees. They said that began to send down this little ladder-like device. And I suspect there probably could have been humanoids if this sighting had continued to its fruition, but it didn't. The object quickly took off. Another interesting case, researcher Wendell Stevens investigated a case at Florence Elementary School in Florence, Arizona, where the object was described as, one of the students pointed out, he says, asked the teacher, "What is that? Is that a trash can lid flying? Look at the flying trash can." And all the students looked, and the teacher, and sure enough, there was this large metallic disc just hovering right next to the school. Interestingly, this was right next to an airport. This is true in a number of these cases. In every single case, the people at the airport, when contacted, denied seeing anything or capturing anything on radar. So that's quite odd. At the one at Maranui, New Zealand, with 400 students, there was an airport right next to the school. That object, which was huge, should have been visible to everyone at the airport, but they denied seeing it. Now, whether this is the result of a cover-up, deliberate, or they really didn't see it, hard to say. But again, I think what the ETs are doing is showing themselves intentionally. All over the world, another one in Glasgow, Scotland, 1978. The students described it as looking like two fedora hats together, metallic, glinting in the sun, very low level, perfectly silent. One of my favorite cases here, North Carolina School for the Deaf. This object was seen by the teachers over the school, and it was making this loud thrumming noise. But what's really interesting is the deaf students could hear it too. They could feel it in their body, this thrumming vibration, which drew them all outside. The teacher said it came so low over the school, he thought it would actually strike the roof. That's how close it was. It scared the daylights out of them. None of the students were scared. They were jumping up and down. They were thrilled. To me, this is a very poignant and touching case because it shows that the ETs show no discrimination and are contacting people of all types, whether or not you've got a handicap. I think they deliberately put on this thrumming noise so that the students would be drawn outside. I'm speculating there, but I find it interesting because most of these cases involve objects that are completely silent. Some of these displays are quite dramatic. Here's one which occurred at Adams Middle School in October of 1982 during a high school dance and game where multiple colored objects, red, orange, green, blue, yellow, put on a fantastic aerial display for over an hour. People were stopping on the street and watching this. The next day at school, government officials showed up and basically explained that what the students had seen was some sort of fireworks display. Well, one of the students became very interested in this and contacted every fireworks company in the city. All of them denied anything to do with this. She later became an intelligence officer in the military and a very, great witness, very intelligent. She worked in the office. She saw these government agents come up and basically told the teachers not to talk about this and made a debunking explanation because it was the buzz of the school, as it often is. Here's very recent cases as well. 2002, May 6th, This object came down right over the school, dark gray, metallic. Students were watching it, jumping up and down in awe. The teachers became so concerned, they rushed all the students inside. Teachers rarely have a good reaction to this and will usher the students back into the class, close the blinds, tell them not to talk about it. And that's what we see in almost all the cases where the adults, that is their reaction. Another very recent case, September 15, 2009, Clayton, North Carolina, where an object hovered right over the scoreboard. Again, this is this type of behavior where it's clear that they want to be seen. And interestingly, I think some of these students become contactees. Well, we know this to be the case because they have reported this. And it was the next day that one of these students who saw this object said this object came down right over her home. So I think that may have been the beginning of much deeper levels of contact. She didn't report that, but I wonder about it. I would like to talk to that student and ask her if she's had further encounters, because I honestly suspect she has, just based on what I found out with other cases. Another very recent case, 2015, an object hovering over Rockville High School, coming so low, it's below treetop level. This is important because the average UFO sighting is quite high in the sky. It's usually at night. It's an anomalous light, an average of 4 witnesses, maybe for about 3 to 5 minutes. That's the average sighting. These cases over schools defy every one of the averages. They're very low level, they're very widely viewed, they're quite long lasting, and usually daylight sightings. 95% are daylight sightings. Okay, how much time do I have here? Ooh, gosh. I'm probably not going to be able to finish all of this, so stop me if I go over my time, but I'm going to do my best. Some of these cases do involve landings and humanoids, 1/3, in fact, which is a lot. And they go way back before the modern age of UFOs. This is a very early sighting in Kelso, New Zealand, 1909, just the tail end of the very famous airship wave, which swept across first California and the United States and then the world. But students and teachers, and you can see the witnesses here, described seeing these objects. They drew them, and some of these witnesses actually described seeing a little humanoid through a portal or porthole looking down at them.
Oh, Preston, taking more time. We started a little late, okay?
All right. Okay, good.
Okay.
Because I've got plenty. This is where I wanted to concentrate most of the information.
Yeah, no, it's okay. We started a little late, so take a little more time.
All right, till about 10 after then? Or, well, just let me know. If you can give me a 5-minute warning before I have to wrap it up, that would be helpful. All right, here's another case, very early.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll give you 5 minutes. So at least till the hour. Take it at least, for another 15 minutes. Is that good?
Perfect.
Okay.
All right, here's another very early case. This is a single witness case, but this lady saw, as a young girl, this UFO land on the playground. Humanoids came out. She conversed with them. They said they would come back. They did not come back. This one defies most of the cases, which are multiple witness cases, but certainly a very interesting case. Here's another super interesting case. October 15, 1954. A student was bicycling to work and saw this UFO come whizzing down, doing all these maneuvers, came down right over the school. A police officer witnessed this as well. It stopped, hovered, it turned transparent, part of the section of the craft, and looking down at them was a humanoid. Looked completely human, very friendly, very close up where they could see that it had pale skin and looked like a normal person. And then it turned opaque again, and this object darted off. And this one is very well verified. You can see the Air Force card here from their investigations. Again, this one is another one they tried real hard to debunk, but there were simply too many witnesses. There was a very famous UFO landing at Bexley, England, at this intersection. You can see here in the lower left, the intersection of Ashburn and Whitfield. This object, pictured here, came down and stayed there for a good 10 or 15 minutes and was surrounded by about 40 people who saw this, just standing around it as this thing slowly rotated. They could see what looked like portholes, but they were opaque, so they did not see any humanoids, but it did essentially land or hover about a foot off the ground. Now, this is not a school at this point, but this object slowly rose up and it went directly over Bedenwell Primary School, where it hovered for a full minute, widely viewed, stayed there, then went straight upwards and darted off very quickly. We all know the Hopkinsville, Kentucky case of August 21st, 1955, where the Sutton family encountered a landed UFO and short little goblin-like beings is how they described them, greenish, large eyes, large ears. Turns out this was not an isolated event. At this time, there were numerous people seeing these short little humanoids, including a group of students who were at a high school in Evansville, Indiana, on the evening of August 25, 1955, and saw what they described as a small group, 3 or 4 short little humanoids cavorting. I put that in quotes, cavorting. This is how they described it, on the playing field. And they went running towards them, at which point these little beings leapt away in huge leaping bounds very quickly. They did report it. They were not believed until it turned out many other people in this area were reporting seeing these humanoids, including, of course, the Sutton family of Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Some of these cases I did speak directly to the witness, including Bruce Cornett, who was in band at Conard High School in West Hartford, Connecticut, and was getting dressed in his uniform when Grays showed up in the room. Everyone appeared to become perfectly still, paralyzed, and next thing he knows, he's lying on his back on the floor, had no memory of this. He thought perhaps his schoolmate had hit him in the nose and knocked him out. He jumped up and accused him of slugging him. And his schoolmate said, "No, I didn't touch you. What are you talking about?" At which point one of the other students said, "Oh my God, where did the 20 minutes go? We're all late." So there was missing time. And over the next few days and weeks, he recalled this spontaneously. Grays coming into the room, one of them holding up a little wand-like device and touching him on the forehead, at which point he fainted. He believes he was taken on board because this was the first of what would be many contacts. But in some of these cases, ETs are seen in the school itself. I found quite a few of these. One case involved a student who had Grays enter into the classroom. Everyone froze except him. He's looking around. It's like, why isn't anyone moving? And that's when he saw the Grays walking down the aisles. And the next thing he knew, they were gone. And everyone started talking, and the teacher shook his head and said, "What just happened?" And just shrugged it off. But he sensed some pause there, some sort of lapse of consciousness. Apparently only one student saw these little Grays. Got a number of cases like that. Here is a very interesting case involving a witness. Again, I was able to interview personally, who was at a Catholic high school in Mentor, Ohio in 1964, when this UFO dropped down, and as they almost always do, went right into this grove of trees, apparently landed. She got a telepathic message from this object. She alerted her friends who also saw it too. Apparently not everyone on the playground saw this. She contacted me when I was at Contact in the desert and said, I've got a story for you. And I was so excited because at that time I was actually researching schoolyard encounters, and here was another. So that was very synchronistic. Lots of synchronicities in this field. I've sometimes guided to witnesses in a very unusual way, and that's certainly one of them. And she said this object was metallic, very bright, clearly unusual, oval shaped, came down silently among the trees, hovered there, and she got a telepathic message which said, in clear English, a male voice, remember this day. And said it twice, remember this day. And then shot off so fast it was like a bullet, leaving only a tracer in the sky, and was gone. Here's another really interesting case where everyone was out on the playground and saw this object land behind the school. Now, they weren't allowed to leave the school grounds until afterwards, and certainly that's what they did. After school, everyone ran up to where they'd seen this object land. It was gone, but there was a perfect circle of dried up, crushed vegetation. And at that time, military showed up as well and apparently got rid of the evidence because it wasn't there when they returned. It had been plowed over, if I remember correctly. Now, this was Deer Creek Middle School. It's now no longer standing, this school. Here's a case from John Keel of Mothman fame. Point Pleasant School. This was during that massive wave in West Virginia where a UFO hovered over the school. A mother came to pick up her children and saw all the students looking up. There was an oval-shaped craft, a door opened, and a humanoid was hovering outside. It looked mostly human. It had hair, was wearing a bright, shiny uniform, had very large eyes, scared the daylights out of her. She quickly grabbed her students and her children and drove off. What's really interesting about this is John Keel says he's had a number of cases over schools. And 1966 was a huge year for this. Here's another case I investigated personally involving 6 witnesses who decided that they weren't going to play Foursquare with all the other students and instead played tag at the far end of the playground at Point Elementary School in St. Louis, Missouri, March 1966, saw lights through the trees and thought, gosh, it's an ice cream truck. So they ran through the trees and ran up to a landed UFO and a humanoid, which was not a gray, not human looking, said it looked more like a gorilla with a gorilla's face and large dark eyes, wearing a very tight jumpsuit, was very muscular, and started to back up. They were 10 feet away from this humanoid, at which point their teacher, Mrs. Ohlendorf, screamed. She saw all of this, grabbed the students, pulled them back onto school grounds, into the classroom, shut the blinds, because now all the students were looking and they could see this craft, ushered them all into the gymnasium, ended school for the day. Some of the students saw this craft fly off. It was the buzz of the school for weeks. Now, Hillsdale College is a very well-known, one of the top 5 most famous schoolyard sightings. What a lot of people don't know is this object stayed for 2 hours and actually landed in the swamps in front of the school, was seen by 87 students, faculty, and police. When Jim and Cora Lorenzen heard about this sighting, they said, well, this is very interesting because we've got a number of cases over schools. We think this is an intentional display. We think this is going to happen again. In fact, it did. Raymond Fowler, very prominent researcher at that time, said he had 15 unexplained cases in 1966 in March up to that time, and 8, over half, had occurred over schoolyards. This turned out to be quite intuitive because it was just 1 week or so later, 1 month later, excuse me, that one of the most famous sightings in UFO history occurred at Westall High School in Melbourne, Australia, when some 200 to 300 students and teachers saw 2 UFOs land next to the school. A group of students actually ran, jumped the little barrier there, the wall, right up to this landed craft, close enough to feel the heat coming from it, and it took off. Now this is very, very well verified. The military showed up, told the students they did not see anything, they're not to talk about it, threatened them. This was very effectively covered up. Thankfully, it is still being researched by Shane Hurd, who is continuing to find new witnesses and new information on this case. There were planes circling these objects. There was a nearby airport as well, who again denied any knowledge of these 3 planes or any knowledge of these objects. But even today, the witnesses are still talking about this. You can see a number of them here. There's been a documentary on this case. Some 200 students saw this craft, but even more saw the landing traces as well. And apparently they're still there. Sean Ryan, I'm sorry, he's the one who is studying this, not Shane Hurd, Sean Ryan. And I'm trying to get him to write a book about this case because there's a lot of information. It's a very, very well documented, undeniable case, and still remains Australia's most widely viewed UFO encounter of all times. Has never been explained. And in fact, to this day, you can see that they put up a little monument to commemorate this amazing sighting. Let's see how many, gosh, I've got quite a few more. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly and just stop on a few of them. Duncan Falls Elementary School. A gentleman saw a UFO land right next to the school, thought it was a structure of some kind, went back later and it was gone. Crestview Elementary School, 1 year to the day after Westall High School, an absolute replay of what happened at Westall High School in almost every detail, with UFOs landing next to the school. They cut the school day short. Military showed up while the objects were still there. Students who had walked to school or ridden their bikes were allowed to leave, but the others were detained until school buses could come and take them home. And that was another one that was very effectively covered up. And also very close to an airport, as you can see here, just a short distance away is an airport. Again, the airport officials denied any knowledge of this sighting. So I am of the mind that they didn't see it. I don't know. It could be a very effective cover-up. Hard to say for sure. But case after case of this, there's some 20, 30 students from Crestview who are still talking about this. And it showed up the next day and was viewed by a bunch of adults. So it may have been something in this area that was attracting the UFOs, but it was definitely a display of some kind. Another lady, as a young student, was brought into the basement of the school by the janitor to show where there was a little ET who gave her a very personal message. Said, basically, we are here to remind you. And his little craft was there in the janitor's room. She drew this. It's a very, very odd case. It's got a lot of detail to it, far too much to describe here. But again, I go in much more detail in my book. Just want to wrap up a few more cases here. Sunnyvale, California, teachers and 50 students saw multiple 6 egg-shaped objects at very low level over Patrick Henry Junior High School. And one of these objects actually landed behind the school. One of the students went there and ended up having missing time, which is another indication that there's more than just a sighting in some of these cases, such as this one. A young lady who uses the pseudonym Shane Kurz saw a very unusual gentleman walk up to her dressed in a jumpsuit, very pale skin, large Asian-looking eyes, and proceeded to ask her all kinds of weird, obvious questions, like what's volleyball, and explaining, was curious about details that everyone who's had spent any time on Earth should know, invited her to his white vehicle, landed in the field over there. She declined, walked back into school, immediately turned around. He was gone, but some other students ran up to her and said, "Who is that weird guy? He looked really weird." She says, "I don't know. He was creepy." She saw him later again at a convenience store, and then was taken on board and saw him in the UFO. So she became a contactee. Case after case of these objects returning on more than just one day, as happened at Nathaniel Hawthorne College. Again, not just elementary schools, all types of schools, all over the world, all types of ETs. Stowell Elementary School, students described short, little, 1 foot tall beings. One kid ran up to one of these little beings who shot a little ray gun at him, caused him to faint. They found him in the underbrush after school. He had a little mark on his body. Teachers had to believe them because they saw the UFO themselves. It was a tiny little UFO too, but numerous students saw this. Here's a case where there was a school sleepover, and Grays came right into the group, turned everybody off except for 5 students who were pulled on board a craft and physically examined. I'm going to skip over that one because I'm running out of time here, and I've got a few I want to cover.
Yeah, go to the key cases. That would be great. But they're all fantastic.
Here's one which I like in South Africa because people saw this object actually land on the tennis court. And the next day they came to it and saw all the asphalt, or the mat, whatever the tennis courts are made out of, all torn up. So this is very good landing trace evidence. One lady, she was taken on board in the middle of the playground, walked across the playground and into a UFO, which was invisible. So they were sometimes there when people don't even see them. One student was at school when a UFO showed up, and it followed him home. He ended up running away from home, and they found him at an airport because he was afraid of being contacted. And sure enough, the ETs did. They showed up in his room and said, "You need to come with us." So yeah, some of these people are contactees. We're seeing little 2 foot tall beings. Some of these involve repeated incidents over a period of years, such as happened at Falls Elementary School, where the teachers actually forbid students from going into this grove of trees because so many of them were having encounters. Broadhaven is a very well-known incident involving a group of kids who not only saw a UFO, but saw the little ET inside of it as well. Teacher again had them draw what they saw. To this day, they have not withdrawn their testimony. Initially, it was believed that they were the only ones who saw the UFO, no teachers. But now 2 school employees have come forward to say that they've also not only saw the UFOs, but saw the little beings.
Yeah, there was a Netflix special about that school, wasn't there?
There was.
Yeah. So how many more do you have about?
Just a couple.
All right, that's good. Yeah. Oh, go back to Bud Hopkins. Bud Hopkins was very important in the abduction phenomenon. What do you have to say about him?
He investigated a schoolyard case at Montvale Memorial Elementary, where again a UFO landed and humanoids were seen. You can see their description here. They were walking down the street wearing these weird yellow uniforms. There was a lot of questions at this time of whether or not children make good witnesses. But again, I believe they do. I do want to just go up to a few more cases here. They're all over the world. Here's one at Stagg Street Elementary School where I did interview the witness who saw the 2 ETs standing right here in this courtyard. And here is exactly what they looked like. She was 10 feet away from them. She got no messages from them, didn't see any UFO. But here's one where ETs actually entered into the school, caused complete panic among the students. Roosevelt Elementary School, UFO hovered, landed next to the school, came up over again. There was a big portholes. All the students could see the little ETs inside. I'm going to wrap it up with.
Oh yeah, Preston. Wait, before you get, that's a famous aerial school. But before you, all right, but conclude. But how many schools would you say you have evidence that there's been contact there?
Initially 100. I'm now doubling that number, 200.
200 around the world, mostly America, Europe, maybe Africa here, everywhere.
Everywhere. The only place I didn't find one was Japan, but I'm sure I could.
No, I know some Japanese researchers you can talk to there, but anyway, yeah, finish up because I want to have a discussion about all this with everyone. So yeah.
Yeah, well, okay. I just want to briefly go through the aerial elementary school, not in detail because we all know it really well. It's one of the most famous cases out there. But in 1994, September 16, you can see the school here. UFOs landed right next to it. ETs came out, actually communicated with a few of the witnesses. These are the ones they communicated directly with. ETs did have a message for them. They say we're becoming too technological. There's a good way to use technology and a bad way, and we could do better. Or you should stop chopping down the forests because we won't have any air, or warned against pollution. Emily Trim, very outgoing. She spoke a lot about her encounters, recently passed away, sadly, but she's one of a handful of students who did receive a personal message and did become a full-fledged contactee. And of course, there is a full-length documentary about this by Randall Nickerson. But I love this case because it's undeniable. We now know that one of the teachers as well did see these ETs as well. But some really wonderful drawings by all the students, which you can see here.
It's a very well-documented case. John Mack actually went there to talk to these students, and there's a little video in Randall Nickerson's film about John talking to these students, and
and this was
talking to the parents of the students, saying this is a phenomena, and it was quite dramatic. Actually, I think the Netflix special on this was really good. Under the encounters,
there was one guy who tried to debunk it. I didn't find him the least bit credible.
No, not at all.
But yeah, one of the teachers actually said she had direct contact and the ETs invited her to go with them. She declined at this time. But yeah, all these wonderful students. Final case right here, which I have to mention because it's quite recent. At Akiram Primary School, Sri Lanka, students saw this craft come down and it had landing traces. And you can see the photographs of the landing traces here. Very honorable students who were the head of the class. So yeah, these cases I just touched on, not even half of the cases I've got of this kind.
When you and Neil asked me to join this wonderful event, I said, I want to have a theme, something that I can really kind of really hone in on that's current right now. And I think it's a singular word, and that's telepathy, which is obviously part of the larger conversation around consciousness. Now, it was you, Alan, that said, Alexis, have you heard the telepathy tapes yet? You were probably the fourth or fifth person that asked me, probably within a week. And guess what? I hadn't. So I said, I'm a little behind here, but I'm going to figure out what this is all about. Well, since that time, I have been completely immersed in the telepathy tapes. I think that Kai Dickens is doing a phenomenal job, not in the fact that this is new, but the format in which she is bringing this to us in a very sort of hip, understandable way. And I'm so excited about the fact that this is gaining so much traction on TikTok, on Instagram. I mean, everywhere you go, everyone, layperson and, UFO buff and new age buff alike is talking about this. And the question is why? And so without digressing too much, I want to just focus on this little slide first, just to talk about how does telepathy relate to the experiencer phenomenon? Well, and I know that we've got a lot of experiencers in the audience right now, I'm sure of it. I have never heard of a contact encounter that did not include a telepathic dialogue in some way, shape, or form. Never. That's not to say that doesn't exist, but it seems that is the modus operandi for communication with non-human intelligence and back to us. And so I went to this free survey, and I wanted to just see how prevalent it was among, I think there were about 1,600 respondents in different phases of the survey. And this one had to do with contact modalities, telepathy being one of them. And as you can see here on the little graph, there's just two little bars here. 78% of the individuals that had contact definitely had some kind of a telepathic or thought transfer or a direct knowing that was being transferred from NHI, as opposed to 22% that did not. So right off the bat, that tells me there's something happening here. But I want to show you something else. I said, okay, we know, those of us that have studied this and that have had experiences and that have read about it know that this is a common denominator in the contact phenomenon. However, my question was, okay, if there's a telepathic dialogue that's ensuing between the experiencer and the NHI, as we're calling them now, what about after contact? What is the disposition of the individual once they come back, if you will, living and working in a normal world? Do telepathic abilities either begin, is it engaged, or even increased? And I want to show you guys something here that I found. This is a little poll that I just did yesterday, wanting to get an idea if this could be the case. And you can see it right in front of you. I hope you guys can see it. But essentially, I asked, are you an experiencer of ET contact? And if so, did your contact encounters include a telepathic dialogue? The inference is yes, of course. But if yes, did you emerge from your encounter with a telepathic ability? Well, you see what the numbers are here. 50% said yes. 32% said no, okay, and 18% said I can't recall. But the bottom line is 50% said yes. So there's something going on here, Alan, when it comes to not just when you're in the throes of the encounter, but what is the experiencer left with post-encounter? Now, for those of you that have been watching the telepathy tapes, you know, particularly in episode 1, both Kai and Dr. Hennessy Powell talk about this resistance on the part of, first of all, mainstream science to even acknowledge, after all of the evidence, that it exists or it can be replicated or shown to replicate. But they also talk about individuals that are interviewed. In episode 5, there are teachers that are interviewed, and they talk about their resistance to say anything to anyone for fear of not just ridicule, but maybe getting their licenses pulled. I know that Dr. Hennessy Powell, I believe, when she first proposed this, had her license pulled even without or before, you know, the work that she had done had been peer reviewed. So obviously there's a resistance to talk about the fact that you're either having telepathic communication or have at some point, and that it's a real thing. So I would imagine that maybe even some of the people that said no here, or I can't recall, even if it's anonymous, don't want to say there's like a taboo. And I think Vincent touched on this, didn't he, Alan, in terms of just this, to paraphrase, this ignorance about, or naivete, or just, you know, wanting to go along still with the societal norm of still calling this woo-woo. We're way beyond that. We're never going to get anywhere unless we get over that. So I don't want to harp on that, but I just wanted to share that. So, yeah.
No, Vincent did mention some of this, and you're right. Once you have a telepathic contact of some sort, that seed is planted, that
Indeed.
Possibility. And then it happens with people. I think it happens with people all the time, actually.
I think it does all the time. And I want to talk about synchronicity. We're going to get into that too, and how that may be connected. But I'm going to go back to the telepathy tapes because it's fresh in my mind.
I know.
I listened to episode 5 today. And I'm so anxious to hear. I can't see the chat, but wondering how many people in the audience have been listening to it. In episode 5, a very interesting thing emerged in the course of Kai interviewing teachers who had been working with non-speaking young people, primarily autistic. And not only did they realize that the teachers realized that the students were reading their thoughts, but they found themselves to be able to telepath themselves, meaning the teachers were starting to pick up the ability. That's huge.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
I mean, to me, that's a major thing. And so again, how it relates to the fact of what this whole conversation is about, which is about disclosure, finally being exposed to the wider universes that we occupy, who we're occupying it with. All of these things are directly related. I have said before, the biggest discovery insofar as disclosure is concerned is self-discovery. What we learn from our contact encounters is what we learn about ourselves. The more we learn about ourselves, the more we're probably going to ignite more contact encounters until a relationship is forged. So
that's so good, Alexis. That is such a good statement that kind of sums up a lot of what we've been talking about the last 2 days. And you make a statement in your notes to me that humanity will become telepathic, like all of us, like it'll just be a natural thing.
Guess what? Let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
Well, let's do this before we go to the next slide, because I'm going to answer that. This is all kind of connected, but so not to prove my point, but to intimate that this may be going on. Let's look at another slide from Free where I highlighted what happened after contact. I became more psychic than I was before, 58%. I often knew things before they happened. That can be called precognition, in some cases premonition, 64%. And then of course, able to channel information, not as much. And then electrical sensitivity. A lot of people are aware of that. That's pretty high. But I wanted to point out more psychic than before, which would include being telepathic as well as knowing things before they happen. Okay, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, so to speak. So let me move on to, let's talk about synchronicity. So to not to answer your question, but to talk about this a little bit. How many of us are telepathic now? I wish I could see hands in the audience right now. I'm going to ask you this. How many of y'all have had a synchronicity?
Well, you could put it in the chat. There's about 50 people listening. Yeah, put it in the chat if you've had a synchronicity.
Can I just type it in? How many of you have had a synchronicity? I'm just going to say synchro, period. Did it go in? There it is. I don't know if it did or not. Maybe you can put it in. But you can hear me. You can hear me.
Yeah.
Look, we know what the answer is. Probably every single person that's watching right now. At least 2/3, it said, 67% or more of the US population alone has had at least one synchronicity. I would venture to say most people have. Synchronicity is considered, and you all know what it means. You're smart. You know what it means. You've had them. But it's considered kind of more of a benign ability or a benign occurrence. You know, I was thinking of a friend. I can tell you a story about this happening just the other day. I was thinking of a friend and hadn't heard from them in 5 years, and then they called. Probably one of the most common occurrences ever. But here's the question. Is it really synchronicity or is it telepathy? And this is why I bring this up. Can I tell you a story?
Yes, this is a real great connection you're making here. Please.
Okay, let me tell you all a story. So this just happened synchronistically yesterday. 2 days ago, let's just say, I was lying in bed, and as I often do, my mind's kind of wandering. I'm getting ready to kind of fully come into consciousness. And out of the blue, somebody that I hadn't talked to for about a year popped into my mind. I'll call her name because I know she's not on the call today. Her name is Sherma. She's a lovely one. I've known her since college. She lives close to me here I'm living in the South now. That's why I keep saying y'all, even though I'm from Boston, the Boston area. Anyway, I'm in the South and she lives not that far from me. She's in the Atlanta area. I'm in South Carolina. And I thought about her and I'm like, why haven't I heard from Sherma? It's been a while. You know, she knows I'm down here. I'd like to see her. Okay. I let the thought go. Yesterday, 8:00 in the morning, I'm having my coffee. My phone rings. I look. I'm like, oh my God, it's Sherma. I laugh because these things happen for me quite frequently. What do you know? It's Sherma. This is just the beginning of the story. I answer the phone. Good morning, Sherma. Long time no talk. Click. I'm like, what was that? She calls back. I'm like, hello? She's like, Alexis, What just happened? I said, what do you mean? You just called me and you said, or you just called me. And she's like, yeah, I just picked up the phone and I heard your voice say, good morning. I said, you mean to tell me you didn't call me? She said, no, my contact wasn't even open. My contacts weren't even open. So what happened here? Well, needless to say, we had a very long conversation where it turns out going to hook up in a couple of weeks, maybe about 3 weeks. Something else happened after that. Somebody that we mentioned on the call who I hadn't heard from in months proceeds to call right after. So I said, okay, what's going on here? As timing would have it, I'd be talking to you about it today, perfect timing. But it got me to thinking, and this is not the first time I've thought about this. Is this really something that would be as innocent, as benign, and as involuntary as a synchronicity? Or at some level, was the higher consciousness of Alexis and Sherma at some level meeting in this field that we have called the consciousness field? It's what the psionics are talking about a lot now. This field, Jake Barber has talked about it a lot, that exists. And frankly, it's been talked about using many different languages, the Akashic, the 0 point field, the field that I believe we're all inextricably linked to. But could it be that synchronicity at its core is really an unconscious agreement to meet and bring it down into the physical, whether it's a phone call, a synchronistic meetup, all sorts of things happen in the world of synchronicity. But I really started to question the fact that synchronicity may be a lot more than we think, that we may be telepathing constantly back and forth. Ergo, if 67% or more of the US population say that they've had a synchronicity, and synchronicity is really a form of telepathy, well, guess what? Most of us are telepathic right now.
Right. And Alexis, I think it's accelerating. There's more of that going on.
Absolutely. There's no question about it. And I think there are a lot of triggers for why that's likely happening, not the least of which is the conversation is becoming more mainstream vis-a-vis the social networks that we're immersed in. But I think it goes even beyond that. I mean, you could attach it to so many different things. Is the frequency of this planet and indeed the solar system and beyond increasing? It seems so. We can even look at something like the Schumann resonance and look at what they call the heartbeat of the planet and these really, really erratic fluctuations where that beat is going up exponentially. That's also very controversial, but we're seeing that. We're seeing data that's showing us that. Does that denote the frequency? Part of it, I do think. I think there are a lot of things kind of converging and going on, but as a result, individuals are having more experiences. I know in the work that I do and the show that I have, Higher Journeys, I'm hearing from a lot of my audience members that heretofore could give a you-know-what about these topics, and they're now finding themselves not only interested, but immersed in them because they're having these experiences. So yeah, it's, but I hope that people are kind of following along here. Could synchronicity really be telepathy? Big question mark, but I think it's worth exploring.
And if it's accelerating, I think this gets to the next point. Are we getting closer to the essence of the phenomena in a sense, because we're opening up to these greater realities?
Yeah, well, if you're talking about the phenomenon of contact, or
Yes,
it's more than contact, Alan. I think it's really getting into a cadence and a relationship with all forms of what we call non-human and even partial human consciousness. The answer to that question, I think, is yes, for sure. And that goes back to something that Vincent said, the last thing he said in terms of the evolution of the evolution of consciousness or contact is contingent on the evolution of our own consciousness individually and en masse. And so all of these things are contributing. That's why I'm so excited about A, the fact that you and Neil are doing this right now, and B, because we've got this robust conversation going on insofar as consciousness is concerned within the ufology field. Something is about to happen. I've never felt anything like this before. I don't know how the audience feels, but this has been some of the most challenging, and I'm saying last 2-3 weeks, month, I'm like, are we
Yeah.
in a Mercury retrograde right now? Something weird is going on. There's tension that's happening, and not just people tension. I mean, even in physical relationships and all sorts of mishaps are happening. But there seems to be an energetic tension that's happening as well. I find myself. I mean, I'm an empath. I'm sure you are as well as many people in the audience. Are you feeling it, you guys? There seems to be this really, really unrelenting sort of tension that's going on. And
these ETs they're not different than us. They are using that non-local consciousness to communicate with each other and us. So maybe we're the ETs on some level because we just have a human body. But the other thing is, you say, and I think this is a radical statement, more people have had contact than they realize, as much as 90%.
I have had, and I always preface by saying, not I believe, and no, I can't prove, but I have had a sense, or at least a big question, as to whether the prevalence of contact is far more what I would call ubiquitous than we know. Perhaps insofar as the majority of the planet. Big question mark. I've looked into this with great interest. I've been dot connecting for years on this, and I've come up with a couple of theories, and they're nothing but theories that might lead to, or clues, let's just say, that might lead to the idea that many more people, perhaps the entire planet, are having what I call unconscious contact. And if that's the case, you want to talk about the biggest revelation to hit the planet is, what if the planet popped open all of a sudden and started to have a simultaneous memory of their contact? That hasn't happened yet, but I think it would be a heck of a revelation. Here's some of the areas that I looked at, Alan, when it comes to the clues to contact. We know that phobias are probably one of the most common things we have, that stuff that we carry as humans. Not everybody has a phobia, but many people do. But there's some very interesting phobias that I didn't even know existed, that I kind of serendipitously ran into in the course of my research. The first you'll see here, and I hope you like my little AI images that I was able to generate. First one is what is called coulrophobia. Oh, there we go. Okay, coulrophobia, fear of clowns. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's exponentially large. People that are afraid of clowns, not just, it doesn't just creep them out. They literally, some people, when they see a clown, they'll run. Well, why is that? Long story short, I've done a lot of research with Mary Rodwell. I believe Mary was a part of this event. I hope. I saw her name on the list. We've done a lot of work together, discussing some of her great work into regression and what is known as screen memory. And I'll never forget a story that she told me, I'll try to make this quick, of an individual that she had regressed, who was a friend of her son's, had a motorcycle accident, fortunately emerged from it unscathed, but he had a very sort of fuzzy memory of some kind of an interaction. He agreed to be regressed. When she initially regressed him, he described what looked to be a clown face and clown shoes. Somehow she knew that was not exactly what he was seeing. She asked him to look again, and what emerged from his mouth was a description of probably what would be described as a gray. I looked into this more, and the idea of screen memory, that is, the actual intensity of the encounter being screened by something that seems a little bit more benign or a little bit more normal. That's fairly common. Owls is another one. So I started looking at that and juxtaposing that with the numbers of individuals that are afraid of clowns. And I thought, okay, might be able to put this in the column, not across the board, but potentially, if screen memory is as rampant as we think, coulrophobia, or fear of clowns, could indeed be, one of those things that could put more people in the column of they may have had an experience. Here's another one. I'm going to quickly go through this. Have you ever heard of helianthrophobia? It's a mouthful. Helianthrophobia. It is the fear of sunflowers. Now, I found out or learned about the fact that there was even a name for such a phobia through a friend of mine who I also believe to be an experiencer of contact in a number of forms. And she's mortified of sunflowers. And when I looked into that, and she's told me stories, I'm not going to get into that, but she hates them. Somebody brought her sunflowers one day and she thought she was going to throw up, actually. And so I thought to myself, why would that be? Well, I'm going to let you guys look at this image, and you probably can maybe connect the dots on where I'm going here. When you look at the eye of a sunflower, this very protruding, large, sort of bulbous eye, could you not perhaps connect it to some of the beings that have been described, particularly the grays, but others as well that have large eyes? Also, if you were to turn a sunflower on its bottom side or underside, this, could resemble the underside of what is considered a conventional craft. Okay. Not to mention the fact that within the eye of the sunflower, you've got these little pods, and that's going to lead me to my next image. The little pods where the seeds grow. Pods. This is the next one. I'm going to go right from that to this. There's another phobia called trypophobia. It's the fear of holes or patterns. There are patterns, by the way, connected to sunflowers in those little pods. Well, how would that have anything to do with contact, you might say? And by the way, these are, like I said, they would not have named these phobias had they not been enough people having them, and they exist. Have you ever heard stories told by experiencers? And I think John Mack had covered a couple of contactees that described being on board craft and seeing what looked like pods. And inside of these pods were what looked to be hybrid alien human beings. I've heard personally, I've taken several accounts of individuals that were on board craft and witnessed this themselves. So that was clearly the connection that I made there, because it was very curious. So think of, holes and patterns, honeycombs, things like that could potentially remind them of some kind of apparatus or something that they might be seeing on board a particular craft. Okay, now there are more, by the way, but pedophobia, not pedophilia, but pedophobia, the fear of children. Interesting. As I read into this, I learned that there are people that are so mortified of seeing children, they can't even look at an image like this or an image in a magazine. But why would that be? Now, there could be a lot of reasons, but the first and most prominent thing I thought of is memories of their own childhood encounters. And if some of them were jarring enough to want to shut down that region of the brain to not recall it, or at a minimum be just mortified about that recollection, that could trigger a fear of children. Okay, I spent a lot of time on the phobias, but that's only one thing, Alan. Look at other things. The question is, what do we have? 8.5 billion people, so they say, on this planet. Let's say even 80% of them are contactees in some way. Unconscious, though. Dream encounters with beings. I have talked to a lot of people that swear that they have not been contacted, but they've had dreams that would resemble a contact encounter. That would be in the column of non-physical contact. Spiritual awakenings. There are lots of different names for them. Kundalini awakenings, transcendental peak awakenings or peak experiences. Many people coming forward talking about that say, no, I've never had a contact encounter, but I recently had an awakening, an epiphany. All of a sudden, things changed for them. I myself am an experiencer vis-a-vis my spiritual awakening back in 2005. And then there's the more, the angelic realm, or I started to say those that kind of fall into more of a religious connotation. When you bundle all of these together, you're talking about a lot of people. A lot of
Well, let me ask you, just going back to the phobias for a second. A phobia is caused, I think, I'm not a psychologist, but by a trauma that's then associated with the occurrence, and then a screen memory comes into play, whatever. But people on the last few days have talked about the trauma of contact, and it's how it's not all pleasant. And maybe that's why 80% of the people have suppressed it. And that might be true, because I talk to people all the time. They tell me experience. I said, that sounds like an experience. But what do we do with the trauma? There's many people who've suffered over that. So how do we deal with that?
That's complex. And I couldn't begin to answer the question. I mean, when we think about the phenomenon of trauma. And let's look at some of the experiments that have been done, some declassified, not the least of which is MK Ultra, in which they inflicted trauma on children, testing the brain, which is a very, very powerful apparatus that we still know nothing about really. But they found that by inflicting trauma on the individual, sadly, very, very often young people, a certain region of the brain, I don't know exactly where, would shut down, but it would open up another region of the brain in which secrets could be stored, or psychic proclivity goes up a lot. But one section had to be shut down vis-a-vis trauma in order to open up another. And by the way, I cover that in a longer presentation that I've given on unconscious contact, looking at abuse victims and juxtaposing their abuse with their tendency toward contact and other psychic abilities. So, and I have a feeling, I have a sense that there are some agencies that are aware that this is exactly the case. It's complex. I can't pretend to know.
It is complex. I mean, Grant Cameron pointed out that sometimes trauma opens the door to the psychic realm. John Mack had pointed this out with, you know, when people work through the experience or kind of angst, they come out the other side more awake, more enlightened, more psychic, all those things. So, you know, the world's in this flux.
I'm sorry. And not just emotional trauma, but physical trauma. I mean, that's been documented. I can't call the name of the woman that I believe she had a stroke, but subsequent to her stroke, and it was a severe stroke. It may not have been, I don't want to miscall it, but these vistas of psychic ability and other things were incredible, including telepathy. So yeah. Well,
you know, the other thing you get into is the great healings that people have had in contact. So you want to talk about that because that's the other side of things too.
Again, another big revelation. Going back to the question, you know, in terms of, I'm looking at this, what do experiencers know that the rest of the world has yet to grasp? And I'm hoping that these are some of the things that they will soon grasp. And one of them is instantaneous healing. Let's look at that real quick. How do you like that image?
Beautiful.
That was actually a little video that I was able to take a snapshot of. I want to share a couple of stories if you guys will indulge me. One having to do, in fact, I'm going to read something to you. I'm going to use a different name because this was a client of mine from, I do coaching for spiritual, what I call conscious coaching. And I'm going to call her Susanna. Susanna sent me an incredible testimony of being healed. She's been an experiencer for many years, and she told me the story of a healing that she had when a being entered her room. Now, forgive me, I'm going to look off camera because I need you to read it. And I am going to read it word for word. And Susanna, if you happen to be here, you're going to know who you are. I'm not calling you by name for reasons of confidentiality, but she said this happened. Well, let me go back. In 1988, she said she acquired hemorrhoids. They were part of her life. She had severe problems and agony and embarrassing moments. She says, I was in constant pain. In 2018 or 19, they disappeared. This is what happened. I dreamt or had a vision, not really sure, that a small gray appeared in my room, very warm and friendly, being pointed to the wall across from me, footboard. There appeared a taller gray alien and a very tall and beautiful woman with dark hair, very stunning. She smiled as the tall alien smiled. The small gray said, we are going to help you with your pain. Do not be afraid. The woman is here to comfort you. Then she waved. I was on my back looking at the tall gray and the beautiful woman. Surgery began. I felt nothing. I awoke and she said, as God is my witness, no pain, no bleeding. I was healed and feel amazing, and they haven't returned since. Okay. So this is one account. There have been many. I'm going to share another one very quick, and I think I can mention this person's name because he told me the story on my show, so it's been shared publicly. Michael J.S. Carter, you may know that name. He's a well-documented, he's been on Ancient Aliens experiencer, and also very.
I know Michael Carter, Reverend Michael Carter.
Michael Carter, that's right. He wrote, I believe it was Aliens in the Bible or something to that extent. Anyway, he had a similar encounter of instantaneous healing that he shares where I don't know when the date was, it was quite a few years ago, where he had what turned out to be a very severe blood clot in his maybe left leg. He said that his leg blew up so big it looked like LeBron James. And it was very serious. And he obviously went to a physician and they scheduled a procedure. But just prior to that procedure, one night, he was in bed. And I'm going to misquote a little bit because I can't recall the exact details. But he said that a very large being walked through his wall, not the first time, but this particular being looked different, very masculine looking, very tall, very not threatening looking, but imposing, let's just say. He woke up, couldn't move. He saw the being project a blue beam into what he described, I believe, his abdomen. As soon as it happened, the being vanished. Michael fell right asleep. And the next morning, the clot, his leg was normal size. He subsequently went to the physician. The blood clot was gone. So those are two that I wanted to share with you. Why is that?
There's been many others. Richard Doty yesterday, and I don't know if people believe him, but he talked about a woman who had paralysis, nerve, split. And on 5 days she was missing on a ship, she says, and came back completely healed. So, and of course, Preston Dennett's going to come on later in the show here and talk about lots of cases. So it's not unusual. There's also the other side. There's the Carla Turner side, if you know her story. So there's this polarity, and maybe it has to do with reflecting the attitude of the person. I don't know why some people have good experience, some people have bad experiences. I mean, you can have a bad experience. Matthew Roberts, I think his book is called Initiate, had some awful experiences that he just had to deal with psychologically, and then they turned into beautiful experiences. Whitley Strieber, who's going to be on 2 people from now, and you come back on, maybe he'll be here for the panel discussion, had an awful trauma, and now it's his life. Now this is his world in a way.
It's his world. It's so interesting when you just kind of juxtapose the hellish or horrific encounters with the blissful ones, and the couple that you just mentioned, where it seemed like they almost transformed from hellish to blissful. What does that have to do with us, Alan? I continue to ask the question, and I continue to have a sense that there is some form of a symbiotic relationship, a shared relationship that we're having with these beings. Some of these beings, perhaps some of these beings are alters of us, or reflections of us, are reflecting an aspect of us, of which we have both shadow and light, as do they.
Yeah, you're right. There is a reflective quality to the phenomena. But let's get to your final point where you wrap it up and say, is the world ready to, under the larger world, the world out there? I mean, I feel we're chosen because we chose ourselves to look at this, and everyone watching, everyone here online, they've chosen themselves to really engage this phenomena in an open-minded way, and most people haven't. So how does the world start to consider these realities when they're, first of all, very conditioned by the media and by their own, limited thinking? And how do we start to turn this around? That's real disclosure. So what do you think?
Well, here's the deal. Let's assume that most of the reality that we encompass is unconscious. Most of the thoughts, most of the, the reality is on an unconscious or subconscious level. And then let's suppose that at that level, it's already happened. That would mean that it's actually happening right now, even though it's not being enunciated. You're not going down the street or in the grocery store and saying, hey, you know what? Isn't this great? Now we know. I don't know that needs to happen at this moment, whether we're ready or not, consciously, that might take a little bit more time, but I think we're in that process right now. There's an arc or a curve. And I mean, I think we can see that even by virtue of how it's being discussed, the sort of tenor of how it's being discussed on mainstream outlets, not the least of which is News Nation, right? They've kind of taken that baton and they're really, just like, for whatever reason, which is very curious to me as a mainstream outlet, because they are, but for whatever it's worth, it's happening. So I think that even though the reality is still sort of living in sort of an unconscious or subconscious space, it's happening right now. Just like going back to the synchronicity, is it really telepathy? Did I think of my friend and she called and because it was a coincidence? No, because what's really happening is happening in the field of consciousness, which is somewhat, in some way, unconscious or at a subconscious level, if that makes sense. There is an invisible plane that we occupy concurrent with you and I talking right now. There may be another conversation going on right now, Alan, that you and I are having on the hill, right? On the hill.
You're onto something, because we've been taught to live in a flatland, and what you're talking about, this underlying field of telepathy, we can call it that, that's always happening. One of my favorite quotes is that we are always dreaming, but our conscious mind makes such a loud noise we don't notice it.
I love that. I don't know who said that. I do agree. Yeah. People talk about
how does the world wake up, though, Alexis, to this bigger reality that the ETs, whoever they are trying to hint at?
I wish I had an answer. I so wish I had an answer. How do we wake up? Maybe we as a collective don't, in the way that we understand being awake to be. Maybe, and I'm thinking as I'm talking to you, because I don't know, I'm just exploring the possibility. Perhaps this field that we may coexist on will become closer and closer to what we call the 3D physical world, that the two will coexist and maybe merge. That's a possibility.
Right. I mean, no one knows. Another one of my favorite quotes is by John Mack. And he says, UFOs, what does he say? He says, UFOs are here, something to help us, for the consciously impaired. That's us. We are the consciously impaired.
For the consciously impaired.
No, UFOs are a sign from the universe for the consciously impaired. That's humanity. That's our, and we are waking up, at least people involved in this field. Even Grant Cameron, he was a nuts and bolts, and then he went, "Oh, it's all consciousness." Yeah,
right. Well, you just triggered something that I wanted to bring up in terms of those of us in the field and those of us who are awake to the extent that they understand that this is a reality. You've all heard of the butterfly effect. You've all heard of the 100th monkey. I know. Meaning that, speaking of non-local consciousness, does it take a literal awakening, an aha moment, an epiphany of every single person on the planet to make it a done deal? I don't think that it does. This has been talked about before, using the not just the analogy, but the process of the butterfly effect. When enough people have that sense of awakening, somehow, given that we're all still connected to this field of consciousness, it's going to have an overarching effect on the masses. Until eventually there's a conscious awakening. And that's why I say, Alan, I think this is happening as we speak. Yes. Literally. Why is it that so many people, young people on TikTok, can't stop talking about the telepathy tapes? As an example, I'm not saying that's the be all end all, because we know this research has been going on for 100 years, but it took it in this manner to awaken. Otherwise, people that would be watching Netflix and looking at other TikToks, they're talking about these things. So we're underway. We are underway.
Look at the drone phenomena that just went down the last couple of months. Even if they are maybe government, maybe not, but people are aware of something in the skies that they have never been aware of before.
Here's what
We're in a revolution. We are in.
I know you've got to close down, but here's what I want to say about the drone thing. Of course, that's a big enigma, right? Whatever it is. I don't even know if it matters. I don't think it matters, and here's why. You just said it. What has happened, or what had happened, I think they're still showing up, has caused people to contemplate the possibility, maybe a little bit more than they would have if those drones weren't there, regardless of whether they were man-made or something else. And I'm not even going to get into that. Let's say that those drones are some kind of covert op that is completely 100% human. The people that created that op had an intention, but sometimes the best of intentions go in the direction that it's meant to go in. Ergo, even people that have malevolent ideas about some of these things, it's bigger than them. And that's what takes us back to this idea that non-human intelligence may ultimately be, forgive the cliche, at the control panel, because they can take these otherwise malevolent acts and turn them into evolutionary acts. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I'm totally in agreement actually with everything you've said. I think you're right. There's many more contactees. I know in my own family, some of the symptoms that show up. My mother, she had a fear of cats. I said, what is it about the cat? She says it's eyes. And I said, well, maybe you. And so it's so pervasive. But for you, just and maybe Neil wants to jump in, but what's the last question I have for you is, what do you think is going to unfold? Well, I mean, we don't know, but intuitively, what do you get about this phenomenon? Yeah.
Intuitively.
Just
well, I can see my eyes are closed. I feel that there is going to be a watershed moment. I think that there's going to be an event. I do. I feel, and the when, I don't know, but I feel that we have been leading up gradually. We're being worked with gradually to acclimate us to this ultimate epiphany. I do feel it's coming in our lifetime. I don't know what it looks like. I can promise you it will look nothing like anything we can imagine. We probably try to imagine every possible scenario, but I do believe it will be an event, ready or not. Here we come.
Here they come. Yes. Thank you.
Disclosure is not important to me, by the way. It's a trivial thing, and all of these shows. There's a new one coming out. Just was at South by Southwest the other day, and I've seen most of it. And it's another one of these things that doesn't actually get off the dime, where 36 different people, all of them. Some of them old friends of mine, and some of them people I've never known before, tell of their knowledge of this, which is very extensive. And that's wonderful, and it's very convincing. But to get off the dime, the certain things have to be taken out into the public space. This is why I have been maintaining for years that one of the craft that we possess should be placed in the Smithsonian Museum. I think that would help a lot. The next thing that needs to be done is there are a number of, or at least were years ago, and I hope they still exist, but God knows the people involved in this are very cavalier about all of this. So there were bodies of some of the small beings, not the taller ones, that were in our possession and that were thoroughly analyzed as best we could with the abilities we had over the years. They were arrived in our possession in 1947, and the various types of analysis that were done in phases as our science became more sophisticated. The last analytical work that was done on in DNA, as far as I know. Their bodies were at Fort Detrick for a long time. Where they are now and whether they even still exist, I don't know, because one of the things the Defense Department does to keep itself keep its hands clean is it offloads material, debris, everything it has physically, especially to private industry. That way, if you file, and also records, a lot of records about this are kept in the Iron Mountain facility, and then the record storage facilities, one of which owned by EG&G Rotron in Woodstock, New York contains, I believe, a lot of the older records. But they're not in the possession of the Defense Department anymore. They've been probably illegally offloaded to defense contractors so the DoD can safely say, we don't know anything, we don't have anything, we can't find a single piece of paper.
Right.
Go ahead. Shall I go on?
No,
or you
yeah,
want
I want to just, I mean, I know what you're saying. They cover their tracks. Absolutely. They don't want this out. The experiencer is the most, I would say, dangerous element to what's really going on. I mean, and you said you've been the most, negated person in these conferences, the Soul Conference, all that. So you talk about that.
I can't speak at any of these conferences. I'm not allowed to because I'm gonna. But I don't really care about that. I couldn't care about any of that. Disclosure doesn't really interest me very much. I hardly ever think about it. What I am interested in is the relationship between you, me, or actually I did that wrong. Me, you, there it goes, and the visitors. That's what I care about.
Right, and that's your last book is about that. So please go over that, and I think people should buy this book. It's a breakthrough, but please.
Great. Buy my book. Yeah, it's called The Fourth Mind. This is my whole life. It's not just The Fourth Mind. This is every book I've ever written is about opening this door in our lives. The face on the cover of Communion, designed, it's right over there, and the painting is right up there beside the painting of Anne. Designed by the visitors, which I was not aware of at the time that I was having it painted. I was sat right beside the artist while it was being painted, and just told him exactly what to do. What I did not know was they were in my head helping me. I mean, they were. You can read about how it was done in Communion. That I was aware of, but I didn't know why they wanted this painting to be so precise. It is not a precise image of their heads. Their heads are much bigger, but it's let's put it this way. It's the right size to fit on a book cover and make the eyes big enough to do what they wanted. And those eyes are the beginning of contact where it counts between you and me and us and them. The contacts with the governments are a side event. They're not that important. Our souls and our relationship to their souls is of great importance. Do
they have a soul? I mean, people have questioned that. Is it greater than? And in some ways, all souls seem to be the same on some level. So talk about that, please.
Okay. Well, in order to talk about that, we have to talk about voiced and non-voiced species. And let's begin there. A voiced species is a species like us. We communicate with voice through the air into each other's ears. They are an unvoiced species. They do not have vocal cords. In the new book, The Fourth Mind, a big part of it is demystifying their biology and their anatomy and their genetics and their brain function in detail and accurately. The first time that's ever been done inside or outside, because believe me, the work that's been done on the inside is all scientific work, very little analytical work, if any, about what is this about. No sociology whatsoever, no anthropology, because they can't address this anthropologically because they don't know what they're like. And forget about these stories about people going to other worlds. It has not happened. The Serpo thing, it's fiction. So, okay. We are a voiced species. They are an unvoiced species. This is the difference. Our consciousness is isolated in here. Our eyes, ears, nose, our senses bring everything into us. Their consciousness is different. They have no vocal cords. They cannot speak. They don't even have a syrinx like a bird. They can make sounds, one basic sound, well, a number of different tones, depending on what they're trying to communicate. And these sounds are truly extraordinary, but they are not words. All of the communication is telepathic. This means that even though they have individual personalities, and I hear these people from the intelligence community, the military, say, hive mind, how stupid. They have individual personalities. The taller ones, the 5 foot and the 7 foot tall ones, which are 2 different levels of the same species, and the little tiny ones, which are mostly the ones we see when we do see them. The little ones are like avatars of the taller ones. In other words, when you see 3 or 4 of the little ones, somewhere there's a taller one who is in control of those bodies. They're like extensions, and they're expendable. So if they're going somewhere dangerous, you're going to see the little ones. That is to say, if they're going to show up in your house, it's highly unlikely, very unusual, you would see one of the big ones. You would see the little ones. Okay, so they have a very rich general mind. They have a single consciousness and many different personalities. That's what they are. And it's very, very different from us. Voiced species, from what I understand from them, do not have a very long lifespan. They are ephemera in consciousness. But what we do have that has a long lifespan is the same thing that they have, that is the non-physical part of us. The non-physical part of us is in unity. It is humanity. And when you die, like when my wife died, right after she died, she was an absolute master of these things. That woman back there who called the book Communion, she seemed to be just a kid from Ann Arbor, and I was a kid from San Antonio, Texas. We were nothing special. We met, we fell in love, and that woman changed the world more than I did. Never forget that. In any case, she understood that the soul was indeed a living reality. And she began to plan her death 9 months before it happened, long before I knew she was going to die. She had already made a decision not only about what to do, but when to die. She created an avatar, and she taught me from after death how to communicate with her. It's all in a book called The Afterlife Revolution. And she did it in a way that she didn't communicate at first directly with me. She communicated with friends instead. And then she used that type of communication to teach me how to meditate in such a way that I could relate to her. The first thing she said was that she said, "Whitley, I'm not Anne anymore, but I will always be Anne for you." That was humanity talking. We all have these egos, and in the Western world, they're quite big, very big. And so when we think, well, I want to survive after death, that means I want Whitley to survive after death. Whitley will be absorbed, but there is another level of us that is absolutely extraordinary and eternal and very powerful, and is literally doing this journey in the physical for a while in order to, and I can explain exactly why we're doing it, and also why we are not too far from an inflection point, not an end in our relationship to the physical, but an inflection point of significance.
Well, I want to hear that, but I also want to ask, when people become non-physical, when they pass over, do they become the non-speaking entities you're talking about, like these ETs in a sense, or is there something different?
No, they don't re-inhabit physical bodies, as far as I know. I mean, they can be.
Yeah,
they can be
but
born.
when humans pass over, do humans become the non-speaking species that you're talking about? Do we become that?
You know, that's a very interesting question, because there's some evidence that one form that we see are humans, had been in the human state before. These are these dark blue figures that short dark blue figures that in the medieval Central Europe were called kobolds, because they were the cobalt blue of the blue of cobalt that was found in mines. And there's some evidence that those are human beings, and that they described themselves to one of the experiencers that I knew who passed away as soul techs, that is to say, soul technologists. And when they would come to the cabin, the children would sometimes see them, and they would shine lights on the children's arms and say, "We're doctors, we're soul doctors, we're looking at your soul." And it could be that they are part of us, because another one of the experiences who came there, Laurie Barnes, had an experience in 1952 with a group of them, long before anybody knew anything about aliens. I mean, she was reading in bed, 9 months pregnant, or 7 months pregnant, I believe, and it was about 11 o'clock, and she was alone in the house. Her husband was a pianist and out on a gig, and she noticed movement out of the corner of her eye and looked up, and there were these beings standing beside her, beside the bed. And of course, she was absolutely horrified, because, geez, I mean, that wasn't something you expected to see in the 50s at all, anything like that. And she recoiled in horror at what she was seeing. And the lead one tried to calm her down by saying, "Do not be afraid. We're not here for you. We're interested in the child you're carrying." And of course, the child, in the 50s, you didn't know whether it was a girl or a boy or what until it was born. And it turned out, it was a girl, and I've met her, and she's a very nice person. She's a successful person in this life. And no one has any idea why this even happened. But the "we're not here for you" suggests that sometimes they do come for us at the end of our lives. Right. But the next thing that happened was, after it said, "Do not fear us, and we're here for the child," she said she was still in a panic. And he said, "Why are you so afraid of us?" and put his hand on her wrist. And she said, "Because you're so ugly." And then something was said that might be very important. It said, "My dear, one day you will look just like us."
Wow. Wow. That gives me the chills there.
Does that mean that we are the caterpillars and they're the butterflies? Because after all, who knows how a caterpillar would see a butterfly? They might find the butterflies absolutely terrifying.
Right. But these ideas of non-speakers also remind me of what the telepathy tapes, which has been a common topic this last couple of days, talk about the non-speaking autistic children that are telepathic, that we've shut down that parts of us. But we have that capacity to be non-speakers in that sense, right?
We have the capacity to be telepathic and voiced. Absolutely. And right. This is, the visitors had told me a few years ago, and I never go into predictions. I wait until something actually does happen that they say, because they say a lot of things that do not happen. This did happen, which was that all of a sudden, about 6 months ago, I found myself in touch with Kai Dickens of the telepathy tapes. And I realized this is it. They have told me that this is the human future, that we must do this, and also said that it's been hidden from us. The Russians, the French, the English, the UK, the Chinese, all have telepaths working in their governments. I'm pretty sure they all do. I know the United States and Russia certainly do. And they hide this from the common people, because the last thing the ones who control us want is for us to be able to communicate that way.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to learn, because if we do not learn, we remain helpless. There is an extinction event unfolds in X number of years, and most of us are victims of it. The super arrogant people that intend to survive it do so, but they don't have, as it turns out, and I'm not making any number predictions or day predictions, it turns out that they do not have a large enough DNA pool. And that has to not happen. Many more of us have to survive. Telepathy is a great key because, among other things, it brings peace. And we can be telepathic. We can be.
And we are. Alexis Brooks just went over the whole thing, how we all are. But I want to ask you.
Alexis has got a lot of insight into this.
Yeah. What's that?
We all are. All we have to do is know that.
Yes. Yes. So the big thing you've just brought up a few times is this nexus point, this place, this moment in history that seems to be approaching. I mean, you don't like predictions, but give us that. What do you see coming?
I'm not a prophet, and I don't need to be. And people don't like to hear about it. They've all been bamboozled and brainwashed into believing there's no such thing as global warming, there's no such thing as climate change. I'm sorry, there is. And nature is just numbers. Nature doesn't care about what we think. It doesn't care about our ideologies, our political beliefs, or anything. It's just numbers. And the numbers don't lie. What the US government is now doing is destroying our ability to know what those numbers are. And why are they doing that? Because they want it to creep up on us, so we will be maximally helpless when we end up in a situation rather suddenly, and God knows when, where we don't have enough food, we don't have enough water, and we might not even have a viable atmosphere at one point. And going back to the days of the Roman Empire, the climate changed then in 100 AD. It became drier. People began to not be able to get enough food. Their immune systems were stressed. And this empire was destroyed by a series of plagues that occurred over the next 400 years until it was finally completely ruined. You see our future when you go to Rome and you see their past. That's our future. And it's for the same reason. The weather matters. It is not saying it's not happening and killing all of our scientific ability to detect it is just nonsense. It is happening.
But isn't something approaching with these beings, with the phenomena, with our ability to make contact, if you want to call it that? Is there something happening?
It's all intersecting at the same time. They've told me that when everyone on Earth knows for certain that the planet cannot support us any longer, they will come. Now, does that mean the cavalry's going to come and save us? I don't know what it means, but I have a very strong feeling that is not what it means. I think that it's going to be a rough time, and we don't need to have that. But it looks to me like we are going to have it, because the Russians don't care. The Chinese put window dressing on it, makes it look like they care. The United States has decided to abandon it altogether. So the only ones who do care and can do something about it are the Europeans, and they're trying. But the world's #1 polluters, India, the United States, and China, it used to be Russia too, but their economy is so decrepit that they're not really a factor much anymore. India, the United States, and China are not doing anything. India is absolutely doing nothing. The United States was doing a lot, but now it's going to do nothing. And over this 4-year period, it's a very critical period in this. By the end of this period, there are going to be so many things wrong with the environment. It will be crystal clear to many, many people, but not everyone, that we're in deep trouble. Will we survive it? I think so, but it's going to be a near thing.
But the other factor is, if we start to get in touch with these beings that are, I think, here to wake us up, there's a chance we could tap into this other level. I mean, that's my...
Absolutely.
So how do we do that? Whitley, you are the most experienced experiencer that is probably on the planet, the most lucid experiencer. How would you suggest we start to tap into that relationship, which you've had for, I don't know, 40 years or something? Yeah.
Well, the first thing to do is for the people who are already tapped into it is to put your imagination in your pocket and try to see what's actually going on in your life. Because we see it through the lens of our hopes and dreams and fears. We want it to be a wonderful, loving thing. We fear it if we come at it from a Christian demon point of view or whatever. Or we see the Space Brothers, or we see this, or we see that. All of that's horribly weak. It's horribly weak. You need to learn to see the visitors the way you see other people. That's the beginning. And that means that you see them, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because they have got lots of different personalities and lots of different approaches to us and to their own lives. And the other problem is that we are a little bit like, there's so much that they know that we don't know, that we are a little bit like dogs in the house. We can understand what we need to understand to be human, but there's a lot that's going on all around us that we cannot understand. We cannot understand how consciousness really works. It's very difficult for us to come out of our egos. There's a simple exercise, which I call the integration exercise. I used to call it the sensing exercise, but that's not enough. It needs a better word. That enables the attention, which is incredibly powerful. Probably the single most powerful thing we have is our ability to move and control our attention. People are looking at me right now. I've got your attention. But you know what? You can keep some of your attention for yourself, and you can learn to do this always, so that part of your attention is within you and part of your attention is going out into the world. When you live like this, and especially when you meditate like this, and you take your attention and you put it on your body and you let your thoughts roll, you put your attention on your body, something happens. Specifically, as Anne Strieber explained, and the visitors too, they can see you. You begin to glow in a way that you can be seen. Now, we're Americans, most of us listening to this, we're consumers, or we're Europeans, and we don't believe we have a soul, and we're not going to go down that path. So we'll do this 2 or 3 times and nothing happens. No orbs come into our house or anything, and we think, oh, screw it. You have to do it for a lifetime. You have to make this part of your life. I've been doing it since 1969. I do it 4 times a day. I do it at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, at 7 in the evening, at 11 at night, and then usually at 3 o'clock in the morning or thereabouts. Why do I do it at that hour? That is a time that in yoga is called Brahma Muhurta time, the time when the mind is most open. I have written all of my books since Annie passed away by communicating and communing with her and others in that level, including many visitors. It's not downloads. It's working by committee, and they function as editors. The books are mine, but the editorial ideas are theirs. That's quite possible to do. We can live like this. Annie called the book Communion, not Contact, because it is about the sharing of being. Have you got the guts to share yourself with someone else? Our egos say, oh, I can't do that. But you can. And when you do, then we get into real relationship with our visitors.
Well, it's been, I mean, from your example, it's been quite a difficult path, but I mean, you've sacrificed a lot. You've revealed, you were vulnerable. I mean, your process is sort of a model for, in a way, what we all have to go through. Would you say that?
It's not easy, but it's also fascinating and fun and scary. It can be very scary. And, I'm used to that, to the point where I'm pretty sure that one of the reasons that they chose me and not some scientist. I know a couple of scientists who knew enough about this and are really rather jealous that they didn't get chosen to do what I'm doing. But I think the big part of the reason they chose me was I was a horror novelist. In other words, I was a person who could be counted on to be entertained by fear. When I first started, I realized if I'm going to make this, it was about 6 weeks when I struggled with trying to figure out what had happened to me in December of 1985, which was when I was abducted. And finally, I got to the point where I couldn't have it. There was no other explanation except that it had really happened, and therefore that I'd been abducted by apparent aliens, although I still don't know exactly what they are. And I said to Anne, hey, Annie, you know what we need to do? Why don't we go out and walk out in the woods tonight and go back to the place where I'd figured out pretty well where they had taken me from. Go back to that place and just meditate there to try to give them an idea that we were ready for more. And she said, okay, great idea. You go ahead and do that. I said, well, wait a minute. What about, I don't necessarily want to do it alone. She said, Whitley, I didn't get abducted. And I've got a little boy sleeping in the next room. So I'm staying home. But I think it's time for you to start doing this. I'm telling you, I've never known fear like I knew that first night. I got to the edge of the garden and the woods were there. I could not step off the grass into the woods. But over time, I began to be able to overcome my fear with my curiosity, basically. And they responded. I had a computer going crazy here, pardon me. Never mind. If I slightly change color, it's because there's another computer here that is causing this, and I can't turn it off.
That's okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, and the relationship commenced because I was saying to my fear, the hell with you. my curiosity means more to me. This relationship, if it can happen, means more to me than my fear or my anger, because that was there too. I was angry. I'd gotten raped, for God's sakes, raped. And I learned to live with that anger, to tell myself, this anger is part of you. It's completely justified. There's no excuse for what they did to you, but I'm still curious. I'm going to try to do something about this, guys.
It's okay. It's kind of interesting changing colors there. It's like there's a
you find it interesting, but I do not.
It's like a UFO in your living room there, Whitley.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Okay, I think I can make this go to sleep. Yeah, there, it's gone. Okay. Yeah. I realized that I was changing colors, and I thought, is it a mood swings? What's going on here? And then I realized it was this computer. But
yeah,
next,
but you know,
let's keep going.
oh, go ahead. You finish. I also had a question about being a horror writer or horror fiction. Is that I think I've said this to you. Maybe your early childhood contacts made you. I mean, my thought into a horror writer that's screen memories.
It's possible because, you know, I don't remember my childhood contacts as being frightening, but I do remember some things I used to do that would suggest they were. For example, we had a big hedge at the front of our lawn called a ligustrum hedge. It was about 70 feet tall. And it had a lot of long, thin branches in it. You could cut these branches off and strip the ends of them and whittle them down into a little spear. And every once in a while, I would make spears, and I would stack them up in a certain corner of the yard. And in the night, I would go out there. And the yard next to us was very large. It was larger than ours. Ours was big, but theirs was twice as big. It was 2 acres. And I would see this little UFO in that yard. And I would know they were coming for me. And I would take my spears and I would throw them one after another across the fence at this thing. Little boy, what's he going to do with these spears? Come on. But I would do that. And I wanted them to go away. I did not want them to get near me. Then it would be the next evening. Right.
And you also wrote the book called The Night School.
Secret School.
Yeah, Secret School. Also, there's a question from this woman, Selena. Actually, she has a lot of questions for you here. So the fact that this woman heard the message, you're going to look like us one day, does that mean they are the same we are the same species as them? What does that mean to you?
That's a wonderful question. I don't know what it means. It could mean that we are the caterpillar form and they are the butterfly form. Or we're the tadpoles and they're the frogs. Maybe that's a little bit better because they look a lot like frogs, those blue ones. Or it could be that they are another species that our souls will inhabit at some point. Or even that they are us from the future. We don't know what it means, but it seems to me that because of what the children saw at the reported at the cabin, and what Laurie Barnes said, that somehow or another we're connected to those particular beings in this particular way.
Right. You know, another question, I've heard you answer this before, but it's so touching in the way you had expressed it before. What made you go back out to meet those Greys after they did such awful abuse to you, raping and all that? Why would you want to go out and encounter that again?
My curiosity overcame my fear, and it overcame my anger, and the sense that this was somebody else. This was somebody else who really was. I was irresistible. And, yeah, I mean, they roughed me up plenty. And the most awful thing they did to me was take semen from my body. My body, my life force, my children took them from me. But that didn't mean that I was not extraordinarily interested in them. I wanted to know more about their lives, their cultures, their needs, their meanings, what they wanted from us. Why were they harvesting sexual material from human beings? I wanted to know all of those things. But more than that, I wanted to have a relationship, no matter how flawed they may be. And let's face it, anybody who does that to people, takes semen, takes eggs, roughs people up in the night, doesn't give them a chance to make their own decisions, kidnaps them right out of their bedrooms. Those people are flawed, or they wouldn't be acting like that. I mean, they're not angels. So I wanted to know more about them. And I also thought, they're flawed. We're flawed too. I mean, after all, we think, oh, we're not flawed. And then I just say, well, how about the Holocaust, or what just happened in Gaza, or Stalin, or Mao Zedong, and the millions upon millions dead in World War I for nothing. We're flawed also. And all that was in my head when I went out to see them again, because I figured they're just like us. They're flawed. Maybe this is the foundation for a real relationship.
But some people are saying, well, trauma, first of all, awakens people. But the other thing is they're really on a bigger picture here to help us open us up to this field of consciousness. So their bedside manners may not be the best, but they're here.
No, they're not.
But they're here. But they're here to help. This is what I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying there's a lot of people who have said that.
They want us to survive, clearly. There are two messages that come from them consistently. One is the danger of nuclear war. And these are messages, they're not downloads. I'm very wary of downloads, because I think they can be imagination, and people don't realize that. In any case, but they have demonstrated very clearly the dangers of nuclear weapons by doing what they did at nuclear missile sites in the United States and Russia, and their interest in nuclear facilities of all kinds, with all kinds of flyovers and so forth. Oh man, sorry about that. All kinds of flyovers and so forth. And the environmental message has been so consistent with so many of the close encounter witnesses that you have to believe that, even though it is not being demonstrated, like with in the case of the missile silos making missiles being retargeted and stuff, it's still so consistent over so many years that those are their two issues. Those are both core survival issues. They are the two core survival issues of humanity. There's a possible third issue, which is disease, but they have not addressed that. So maybe they don't expect us to get into a lot of trouble with that.
But there is the other element, and the next speaker will talk about this, Preston Dennett. I'm sure you know who he is. But there's an element, right? And I've experienced this in my a kind of elevation of vibration, a kind of upliftment. Yes. Right. So what is that about?
Yeah. Well, that is exactly right. We need to be able to do that in order to engage with them on a less physical and more spiritual level. And when we do that, a lot of things change, because all of a sudden we are more equal partners than something to be kicked around and at the bottom of the garden. And they become respectful of us, and they become both teachers and students, because the ones who I'm with, they are definitely teachers, but they are also learning from me. We have it's a relationship. It's not them, the all-knowing, and me, the little roach crawling around trying to grab crumbs. It's a relationship, and we can have that. I'm quite certain. I think there's, and the exercise I just briefly described is an exercise that increases your vibration. That's why you can be seen in this other level of reality. Why the dead can see you. My wife made it very clear that she could see me when I did this. And that's why I still have a relationship with her, because she can come to this, she can find me this way. And they can too. They can find anybody who does this. And the frustrating part is that, we want some sign that they're here, and that's not necessarily going to happen. We have to, in a sense, we have to trust ourselves, because our perceptions are so numbed by the lives we live and the egos we have, that it's difficult to do this. We could do it a long time ago. In the new book, in The Fourth Mind, I talk a lot about what happened to us in the past. We are a species that was profoundly traumatized in the distant past, in 12,000 years ago, to be exact. And we live in a state of traumatic amnesia. That's why we don't do telepathy anymore, but we once could. It's why we don't do a lot of things that they can do, but we once could. We can get back to that. We can.
Well, I mean, part of getting back to that is getting over the trauma. I think there's also a level of mind control, in a sense, by those that don't want us to wake up, because they want to keep us in control, religions and all those things that are in place. So
right. That's been going on since the history of the human species, the written history from Sumeria and Egypt on, is the history of mind control.
Right.
Prior to that, we didn't have it.
So how do we return to this? Maybe the autistic children, the meek shall inherit the earth. Maybe they are leading the way. Talk about that work that Kai Dickens and Dr. Diana Hennison Powell are doing to help us evolve.
That's a very perceptive segue. I'm very impressed and thankful, because you took this in exactly the right direction, Alan. What Diane and Kai are doing, and the spellers, that is to say, the unvoiced people and autistic people they work with, are doing, is showing us something that we have forgotten we had, and we can regain it. Now, it takes concentration and effort, but you don't need a teacher. You just need to try. You can even do it with someone you love or a friend, and you can get into telepathic contact with them if you're patient. Annie and I did it years ago. And you do it. I mean, here's how we did it. We sat back to back, and we were silent, and one of us would bring up an image of something simple in there. I'll never forget it, in their mind. And the other one would try to guess what that image was by seeing it. And we did it for quite a while, off and on, and we never got anywhere, because every time I brought something up in my mind, she came up with something else. And we finally decided we were teasing each other. And so we said, we're going to get serious about it. We went into the separated attention state, the open attention state that I described earlier. We sat back to back, and I thought of a bottle of Heinz ketchup, and suddenly Annie said ketchup. Mm-hmm. And I thought of a rose, and she said rose.
Mm.
And we went on like that for 10 or 15 minutes. And it was wonderful. And I thought to myself at the time, this is something we've done, and now we've done it, and we can go back and do it again. But we never left that state again for the rest of our lives. We were always in that contact. Then she passed on, and we're still in it.
Mm. That is beautiful. So it is possible to live as a human race that is completely telepathic. Is that
I was telepathic with Annie, and I've had periods when I had vocal telepathy where I could hear people's thoughts. And it's sort of not something I particularly would like to have. I mean, I don't want to hear thoughts. I mean, I don't want to get into people's minds like that. And the most recent one is I was very, very tired. I'd just gone to England, and I had arrived at the Airbnb, and I lay down on the bed. It was about 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. I'd been flying all night and traveling all day. And I lay down, and suddenly I heard all these voices, and I thought, holy moly. It's the telepathy. Telepathy is turned on because I'm tired and I'm, relaxed, and my ego is out of the way. And I thought, I need to sleep. I can't sleep like this. There was nothing. No one was. It was a quiet neighborhood in Walton-on-Thames in England, and there were people gently thinking thoughts, and someone was watching TV, and I could hear their thoughts about the fact they didn't like the program very much. And then there was a man who was hungry and trying to find some food in the refrigerator and thinking about where it was and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I can't. I've got to get out of this because I can't sleep like this. And I just tried to relax, and it faded after a while. And that's happened to me a couple times in my life. There's a trigger word that I have that if I hear it spoken, it doesn't do anything. But if I hear it in my head, it opens me telepathically, and then people or the visitors or people who know about that and have reason to want to communicate with me telepathically can do so, but I can't initiate it myself.
Well,
except
what's that word? So
I'm not going to tell you that word.
Oh, come on.
Oh no, because for all I know, there are people who could do that and get into my head here, and I'm not doing it. I'm just telling you it's possible. I'm certainly not going to tell you my trigger
okay,
word.
You don't have to tell me your secret word.
Damn right.
One more question, because then I'll bring Preston on. We can talk to him a little bit. You said the psionic event that Jacob Barber performed landing that craft was because they wanted him to think he was landing the craft. Is that what you still
No,
believe?
that's not what I said.
Oh, okay.
What happened to Jake was he was working on trying to pick up the egg, and with his probe from his helicopter, and he was entered by a feminine presence that he found very appealing, and he said it was not. It was not ontological shock to me. That means the shock of the new. It was ontological relief, and it's still in me, and I'm very glad of this. And I thought to myself, they don't know what they're doing, but they do at the same time. And I thought it was such a wonderful, courageous, true thing to say. My heart really felt strongly a connection with Jake when I heard him talking about this very personal event. What was happening was he was being viewed as an aggressor, and he was being given a level of emotional vibration that would enable him to see a more peaceful life.
Okay. Okay.
Beautiful. And that's going to happen to more than one of those soldiers who are out there with their shoot 'em ups eventually, when the time comes. The visitors don't mind if you shoot up the little avatars. They're expendable, but they will eventually get pissed off if they figure that we're not getting it.
So those little beings are like robots. They're
No, they're not robots. They're very richly endowed with consciousness, but it's just that the consciousness is being projected from the one that is controlling them. They're not separate entities. Think of them as like your hands that are somehow detached from your body. They're, in other words, they're telemetrically connected to, or telepathically, connected to the main consciousness that, if we shot down or killed one of the biologically independent ones, I'm not sure that would be a good idea at all.